Chapter 248. Lucifer snorted coldly and said, "Your Highness, we people in hell can't be merciful. Don't you know that? If your father finds out, I'm afraid he won't forgive you." Lungair glanced at Chiyu. She knew that although Chiyu's attack power was very powerful, he must be an arrow at the end of its flight after receiving her palm strike and increasing his energy with all his might. Lucifer was really angry. In hell, apart from her father, Lucifer was the most powerful. Because her father doted on her, Lucifer became her guardian angel. If the fallen angel Lucifer really wanted to kill someone, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. Moreover, with his strength, Chiyu, who was at the end of his flight, would definitely not be able to withstand another thunderous blow. Lungair's judgment was right. After forcefully using the meteor chasing the moon, Chiyu's chest was already full of annoyance. The attack power of Lungair's previous palm strike was fully displayed, and she had to use such a huge amount of energy before she could fully heal him. The injuries he had suffered previously in his chest and abdomen had completely erupted. He could only barely condense the remaining energy to temporarily maintain the Golden Sun armor. Not to mention Lucifer. Even if Lungair attacked him now, he might not be able to deal with it. Recently, he had faced several top powerhouses in succession, which made Chiyu realize that his strength was still very insufficient. Even if he could still use the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Big Dipper realm technique, it was impossible to save the current situation. However, even so, when Lungair pleaded for him to Lucifer, he still had two feelings in his heart. One was that he had a better impression of Lungair. So what if she was a princess of hell? As long as she was sincere to him, he could treat her as a friend. The other reason was that Lung Jin's pleading for him had completely aroused the arrogance in Chiyu's heart. So what if she was Lucifer? Could demons not be killed? Chiyu's arrogance caused a strong desire to fight to rise in his heart. Facing a strong enemy, he knew that if he didn't use his last resort, he wouldn't be able to escape today. A faint silver light shone from Chiyu's right arm, causing even the golden light of the Sun-Moon Golden Sun armor to dim a little. An enormous amount of energy suddenly surged out, and the Qilin figure appeared once again. Under Chiyu's intentional activation of the Qilin's essence, the Sun-Moon Golden Sun armor was only maintained on the surface, but the energy was no longer as integrated as before. Lucifer ignored Chiyu, who was gathering energy, and said coldly, "Your Royal Highness, please don't interfere with my decision. This is the dignity of a fallen angel. Even if His Majesty Satan is here, he has no right to stop me from reclaiming my glory. Besides, this person in front of me must be destroyed. This is extremely important for our hell's future march into this world." Lungair was very anxious. When she saw the energy collision between Chiyu and Lucifer just now, she had already made a decision in her heart. It was not because of Chiyu's strength, but because of Chiyu's retracting sword. When she wanted to kill him, he could still do that. It was not wrong for her to like such a man. If he really died, she would definitely regret it for the rest of her life. Therefore, when Lucifer was about to attack again, Lungair immediately stood up and wanted to use her identity as the Princess of Hell to stop him. However, who was Lucifer? Although he was Lungair's guardian angel, his status in hell was absolutely transcendent. Even Satan had to treat him with respect. Chiyu's Xianyuan sword had already posed a considerable threat to him. Once this young man's strength increased to the same level as his, with such an Eastern artifact, he would no longer be his opponent. Moreover, he had injured him. How could he tolerate such humiliation? With a wave of his left hand, a ball of black energy enveloped Lungair's delicate body. Even her ability to speak was sealed. In the face of absolute power, Lungair had no chance of resisting Lucifer at all. With a flash of light, he had already sent Lungair out. However, at this moment, Lucifer was suddenly shocked because he clearly saw that Chiyu's right arm had turned completely silver. Moreover, the right arm that was holding the sword had expanded by at least a third of its original size. The energy that had dimmed after using the moon chasing after the stars burned again, and this time it was much stronger than before. That's right. Facing a strong enemy like Lucifer, Chi is already prepared to use his ultimate Kirin arm. Of course, the ultimate Kirin arm was not enough to destroy Lucifer. However, if he used the ultimate Kirin arm to push the Xianyuan sword, the effect would be different. According to Chi-Yu's calculations, if he used the ultimate Kirin arm with his current strength that surpassed 7 clouds, the effect would definitely not be the same as when he had destroyed the golden winged eagle. Once he activated the Xianyuan 8 laws, he would at least be able to use the power of the 4th technique with his remaining strength. In that case, with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, even if he couldn't kill this guy in front of him, he would at least be able to severely injure him and make him pay the price for underestimating him. As a man, how could he struggle at death's door under the pleading of a girl? The light in Lucifer's eyes became serious again. The silver light that kept twisting around Chi-Yu's body and his gaze that was unafraid of death had already made Lucifer feel alarmed. However, at this time, for the sake of his honor and dignity, he would definitely not retreat. He was also confident that he could destroy this young man in front of him. The 8 wings spread out at the same time, and massive dark energy formed a spiral-shaped domain that enveloped a radius of a few square kilometers. Lucifer was also going to use his most powerful power. At this moment, Chi-Yu's constantly expanding silver energy suddenly retracted and did not continue to grow stronger. Moreover, even the energy aura on his body kept dissipating, and the sun golden armor disappeared. When Lucifer saw this, he could not help but feel a little amused. He thought to himself, could it be that this kid's energy is insufficient? Was he just trying to intimidate me just now? If that's really the case, then you're dead. Lucifer had always thought that he would definitely win, but Chi-Yu did not think so. When he was about to use the ultimate Kirin arm, a deep and domineering voice rang out in his heart. Are you going to use the ultimate Kirin technique? If that's the case, your strength will not be able to recover for a very long time. No matter what, I, the Bull Demon King, am also a bull from the east. I once promised to do 3 things for you. This could be considered the first. Hearing the Bull Demon King's voice, Chi-Yu could not help but be overjoyed. He secretly scolded himself for being muddle-headed. There was still the Bull Demon King. He was not Lucifer's match. As the strongest demon god in the east, he would probably be able to put up a fight even if Satan came personally. The Bull Demon King had once promised him 3 things. Although he would use up one of them, it was still much better than losing all the energy in his right arm. Because of the Bull Demon King's reminder, Chi-Yu gave up on the idea of using the ultimate Kirin arm. He immediately retracted the released energy and replied to the Bull Demon King, "All right, I'll leave everything to you." When he dispersed the energy of the ultimate Kirin arm, the injury on his chest seemed to hurt even more. The energy waves in his body also became much weaker. From the start of the battle with Lunger until now, he had been constantly on guard. Now that he had relaxed, he naturally could not maintain the effect of the sun golden armor. Of course, Chi-Yu also had his own thoughts. He did not hope that the Bull Demon King would kill Lucifer. Instead, he hoped that the Bull Demon King and Lucifer would both be injured. That would be the best situation. If that happened, not only would he be able to kill a fallen angel, but he would also be able to completely clear the hidden problems in his body. After all, the Bull Demon King was in his body. To Chi-Yu, it had always been like a thorn in his back. If he could solve this problem, he would undoubtedly be the happiest. Seeing that Chi-Yu's energy had dispersed, Lucifer did not want to waste any more time. After all, Lunger was still very powerful. If he wanted to use energy to control her, it would consume a lot of Lucifer's energy. Moreover, Lunger was Satan's daughter. After all, although he had not done anything wrong, it was better to end it as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary trouble. A huge amount of dark energy gathered, and Lucifer floated up. His tall and high-spirited figure appeared in front of Chi-Yu in the blink of an eye, and his palm went straight for Chi-Yu's chest. In order to solve the problem in an instant, he did not even use an energy attack. He did not want to give Chi-Yu any more chances. Just when Lucifer thought that he was about to solve the problem, and that Lunger had already closed her eyes, a domineering voice suddenly rang out. "Do you really think that there is no one else in the East?" What greeted Lucifer was a huge fist, and an incomparably surging, domineering aura met Lucifer's palm that was filled with dark energy. Amidst the loud bang, Chiyu's body used the force to retreat far away, and his huge body that was 10 meters tall suddenly floated in the air. Lucifer, on the other hand, was sent flying. He spread the 8 wings on his back and barely managed to balance his body. He was shocked to find that a giant had appeared in Chiyu's previous position. It had a ferocious face, an incomparably strong body, and a pair of super big horns on its head. Its huge, fierce eyes were staring at him, and its hands were clasped together, making a kind of bone-grinding sound that made one's teeth ache. "Who are you?" Lucifer resisted the surging blood and chi in his body and asked in shock. In order to destroy Chiyu just now, he had used more than 80% of his energy to attack with his palm. However, when it came into contact with the huge fist, it was as if it had hit a mountain made of fine gold. It could not move the other party at all, and the domineering energy directly sent his body flying back. The domineering energy waves had completely covered all the directions that he could sense. Bull Demon King snorted coldly and said, "Are all you Westerners like this? Last time it was a white-haired one, and this time it's a black-haired one. Aren't you all beasts? Who cares who I am? I'm from the East anyway. Little guy, if I don't beat you up today, you won't know why flowers are so red." What did you say to Chiyu just now? You want to leave his corpse intact, right? Today, I'll turn you into a bird stick. Hearing Bull Demon King's words that were full of Jianghu aura, Chiyu, who had just retreated, could not help but burst into laughter. When did this old bull learn these things? Moreover, he said it so naturally. He immediately cooperated and asked, "What is a bird stick?" Bull Demon King said proudly, "Isn't that simple? A bird stick is to pluck out all his bird feathers and then tear off all the extra things. Only a bare pole is left? Isn't that a bird stick?" Lucifer was already trembling with anger because of Bull Demon King. He subconsciously cursed in Western countries. F***ck Bull Demon King was stunned for a moment. He had been in Chiyu's body for some time. With his ability to accept things when he was in the West, he more or less knew a few words of English, especially when it came to cursing. He snorted disdainfully and said contemptuously, "Little guy, you want to F***ck me with your morals?" As he said that, he turned around halfway and shook his huge butt at Lucifer, saying, "It's not that I'm looking down on you, but your bird is definitely not long enough." Chiyu was already speechless. When did Bull Demon King become so lascivious? Moreover, his level of lasciviousness was definitely comparable to Hu Guang and the rest. Lucifer's face was already filled with black lines. He could no longer hold back the rage in his heart. He had also forgotten that the huge guy in front of him was much stronger than him. In a flash, he rushed towards Bull Demon King. The dark demon sword appeared once again, and a huge black hole appeared in the circle of the dark demon sword. The crazy suction force was definitely not something that Lung Air's dark energy could compare to. Bull Demon King pursed his lips. The dark energy might have a great impact on Chiyu, forcing him to carefully maintain his energy. However, Bull Demon King was different from Chiyu. His energy contained a certain amount of dark energy, but it was not as pure as Lucifer's dark energy. There was also an abnormally evil energy wave and an incomparably strong and domineering aura. That huge energy wave was definitely not something that Lucifer could resist, even if he wanted to. A powerful energy wave appeared directly in front of Lucifer. When he activated the Dark Demon Sword with all his might to conjure a black hole to swallow the Bull Demon King's body, the Bull Demon King only made one move. He spread his huge arms to the sides of his body, completely giving up any resistance and allowing the black hole to envelop his body. "Little guy, didn't you want to devour me? Fine, I'll let you devour as much as you want. However, your hole is too small. I'm afraid it can't withstand my huge size." The black hole swept out, and Bull Demon King's body was completely devoured. Huge amounts of dark energy filled the air. Chiyu looked at everything that was happening in front of him in shock. He definitely did not want to miss out on the battle between these two super strong people. He was very clear that Bull Demon King was definitely not easy to deal with. From the moment Bull Demon King appeared, he could tell that although Lucifer's energy was huge and could devour him to death, when facing Bull Demon King, Lucifer's energy was only slightly stronger than Chi-Yu's and was still unable to resist. The feeling that Bull Demon King gave Chi-Yu was that he was completely unfathomable. He really did not know how strong this old bull's energy was. Indeed, just as Lucifer heaved a sigh of relief and a resentful gaze in his eyes began to turn into excitement, a layer of dense purple electric light suddenly appeared all over his body. In an instant, not only did the excitement that had just risen up in him disappear completely, at the same time, extreme fear appeared in his eyes. He almost instinctively retreated quickly, and right at the position where Bull Demon King had been devoured, a thunderous sound rang out. A crack in the space appeared, and Bull Demon King's huge body directly stepped out. Under the influence of the aura, Lucifer let out a muffled grunt and spat out a mouthful of black blood mist. His body swayed unsteadily. Just as he was about to use his domain ability, he suddenly felt his entire body suddenly sink. It was as if a huge pressure of 3 mountains had appeared on his body, immediately interrupting the activation of his energy. That huge body appeared in front of him at an unbelievable speed. Bull Demon King's giant spirit palm was already coming towards him. In a panic, Lucifer could only concentrate all his energy on the dark demon sword. At the same time, he retracted his 8 wings to protect his body in an attempt to block Bull Demon King's attack. But how strong was Bull Demon King's strength? With a boom, Lucifer's body was directly sent flying, smashing into the mountain beside him like a cannonball. Bull Demon King laughed. "I told you, this Birdman's hole is too small. It can't withstand my huge size. I'm going to take a look. How much energy do you have left to withstand my attack again?" As he spoke, he had already flown towards the hole that had been smashed open. Chi watched as Bull Demon King beat up Lucifer, exclaiming in his heart. He also did not expect Bull Demon King to be so strong. The evenly matched battle that he had anticipated did not happen at all. In front of Bull Demon King, Lucifer did not even have the ability to withstand a single blow. Actually, what Chi did not know was that although Bull Demon King was strong, the gap between him and Lucifer was not that huge. The reason why he could achieve such a result was firstly that Lucifer had already expended a lot of energy under Chi-Yu's meteor-chasing moon attack. Secondly, it was Bull Demon King's cunning. He naturally understood that Chi-Yu was wary of him. Hence, when he went into battle, he immediately used his strongest ability, Giant Spirit Force. Although there were no visible changes on the surface, Bull Demon King had concentrated all his energy to explode. Once Giant Spirit Force was activated, just like Chi-Yu's Solar Lunisolar Crimson Gold armor, it could increase the strength of its original attack by more than double in a short period of time. Moreover, Lucifer was angered by Bull Demon King's words. In actual combat, he could only use about 70% of his strength. Under such circumstances, he was immediately at a disadvantage in the hands of Bull Demon King. Chi-Yu, who was trying his best to heal his injuries, felt his heart tighten. Lumiere had already appeared beside him. However, Lumiere was not here to attack him. Her long pink hair draped over her shoulders. Lumiere looked a little disheveled. Her eyes revealed a trace of a pleading look. "Chi-Yu, I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. He is only making things difficult for you to protect me. Uncle Lucifer watched me grow up. I have always treated him as my real uncle. I'm begging you." Of course, Chi did not want to let Lucifer go. It was not because Lucifer wanted to kill him. Lumiere had already said that hell would very likely descend upon the human world soon. Lucifer was the strongest person in hell, second only to Satan. Even Chi-Yu could not resist him. Once he really led the Hell Army to attack the East, such a strong opponent would cause great damage to the East. That was definitely not what Chi-Yu wanted to see. However, looking at Lumiere's sorrowful face, Chi-Yu could not bear to reject her. After all, When Lucifer wanted to kill him, Lingere had even given up her dignity as a princess of hell to beg him. Although her goal today was to kill him, before Lucifer appeared, Lingere did not really have the intention to kill him. Lingere, you have to understand that I cannot control that old bull, Chiyu said helplessly. Lingere said anxiously, but didn't you summon him? Ming Ming saw that he was separated from your body just now. It turns out that you actually have such a powerful combat partner. Chiyu, I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. I promise that I will never come to the east again to make things difficult for you. Chiyu's eyes flashed, and he said, then can you guarantee that when hell descends upon the human world, it will not be a threat to the east? This, Chiyu, you should know that this is not something that I could decide. I beg you, let Uncle Lucifer go. Whatever you want, as long as I can give it to you, I am willing. Even if it's my body, I can. Since Lingere had already said this much, Chiyu knew that he could not harden his heart to reject her. He sighed and said, all right, consider it as repayment for the time you saved me. From now on, we do not owe each other anything. If the Hell Realm really wants to attack the East in the future, you should also carefully consider whether you have the strength to do so. Bull Demon King, in the East, is only one of the strong. Even if your father is here, he may not be able to defeat him. Chiyu could not help but feel a lot more relieved that he could repay the debt he owed. At least, when he faced Lingere again in the future, he no longer owed her anything. If the two of them were destined to be enemies in the end, Chiyu could also let go and do whatever he wanted. He would no longer have any psychological burden. Tears flowed down her face, and Lingere slowly lowered her head. She knew that there was an insurmountable gap between her and Chiyu. Old Bull, stop, Chiyu shouted, and along with the fluctuation of his mental strength, he directly transmitted it to the depths of Bull Demon King's mind. At this time, Bull Demon King had already carried Lucifer out of the hole that was smashed. He had always been a man of his word. Under the incomparably tyrannical energy lock, he directly tore off 3 of Lucifer's feathers, causing the fallen angel to let out a miserable cry. Black blood splattered in the air. Bull Demon King turned around and looked at Chiyu. Have you really decided to let him go? Chiyu nodded and said, from today onwards, I no longer owe them anything. I don't owe them anything anymore. Let them go. The Bull Demon King chuckled and said, helping you fight is your first request to me. Then, let me help you. Then, asking me to stop now should be your second request to me. I can let him go, but I only owe you one thing. Hearing him say that, Chiyu could not help but get angry. F***, old bull, if you want to say that, then fine, I'll make my third request now. It's very simple. My last request is that you must do 3 more things for me. Bull Demon King was stunned for a moment and said angrily, what do you mean? Chiyu said proudly, what about you? So what? Since you can act shamelessly, why can't I? He was a ruffian. He had seen this kind of trick many times in the past. Bull Demon King had no choice but to compromise. He casually threw Lucifer to the side like he was throwing trash and said, all right, just one thing. Old Bull is going back. You do as you see fit. With a flash of light, he directly returned to Chiyu's body. At this time, his giant spirit body's ability could not last for long. Ever since Lucifer became an archangel in the heaven realm, he had never suffered such a huge loss. 3 wings. It was extremely difficult to recover. The heart-wrenching pain was not as good as the strong sense of humiliation in his heart. He stood up from the ground covered in blood and looked at Chiyu. His originally handsome face had already become somewhat distorted. At this time, Chiyu's injuries had already recovered a lot. Holding the Xianyuan divine sword in his hand, he looked at Lucifer fearlessly. With Lucifer's current injuries, it was impossible for him to pose any threat. Lingere almost begged Lucifer, forget it, uncle. Let's leave this place. Lucifer finally looked at Chiyu coldly and suddenly disappeared in the dim black light. The last look he left behind clearly told Chiyu that he would return one day. The hatred between the Guardian of the East and the underworld had already been deeply rooted. The next time he came, Lucifer would definitely not be alone. Looking at Lucifer's disappearing figure, Lung-er heaved a sigh of relief. The 3 pairs of black wings behind her disappeared. Standing beside Chi-yu, her aura seemed a little weak. It was not a weakness in energy, but in spirit. Lung-er, Chi-yu called out to her. Lung-er turned around and looked at Chi-yu blankly. She knew that it was no longer possible between her and Chi-yu. Zhao Feng and the underworld had also become mortal enemies. Even she did not know what would happen in the future. After all, she was not the ruler of the underworld. With Lucifer's position in Satan's heart, Satan would not let Chi-yu off after suffering such a big loss this time. We're still friends. Chi-yu stretched out his hand to Lung-er and said with certainty, no matter what happens between the underworld and us in the future, no matter what happens in the future, at least we're still friends now. Lung-er was stunned for a moment. She looked at Chi-yu with the same gentle gaze that Chi-yu had when they first met. Her pink eyes flickered, and she suddenly reached out to grab Chi-yu. Her delicate body rushed forward and rushed into Chi-yu's embrace, kissing his lips. Chi-yu was stunned for a moment. Lung-er's fragrant lips were not as cold as he had imagined. Those warm and soft lips carried a faint sound. Lung-er's alluring body trembled slightly in his embrace. Be careful, Chi-yu. The underworld will not fail. There is no power that can stop us. When the west falls, the east will definitely be our target. At that time, everything will not be under my control. My father will personally come to the human world. Chi-yu's heart trembled. Was Satan going to personally come to the human world? However, could the overlord of the underworld really break through the plane and come to his world? At this moment, he could not help but think of the catastrophe that Yamu had mentioned. At that time, Yamu had said that it was a catastrophe for the entire human race, not just the West. Could it be that she was referring to the arrival of Satan? Lung-er slowly straightened her body. The temperature from Chi-yu's body made her feel very warm, but it was only for a moment. With sadness and a strong sense of regret and loss, she took a deep look at Chi-yu, completely imprinting this man's appearance into her mind. She floated up, her pink dress fluttering in the air. The Princess of Hell had already unknowingly left. Chi-yu watched as Lung-er's figure disappeared. How could he not feel a little disappointed in his heart? Chapter 249. At this moment, Chi-yu was in a bad mood. It was not because of Lung-er, but because of Wen-ting. When he used the solar lunisolar golden armor the previous 2 times, Wen-ting was awake because of the huge amount of energy transferred. But this time, her soul was still in a deep sleep. Wen-ting's soul was different from Xuanyuan's soul, Bull Demon King, Little Peng, and Xie in Chi-yu's body. As for the others, even if they were in a deep sleep, Chi-yu could clearly feel their existence. But because Wen-ting had completely given up on her physical body, she appeared directly in the form of her own energy. Therefore, her soul was very weak. Chi-yu did not even know where she was hiding in his body. Where was Wen-ting? What was she doing? Why didn't she appear even though he had enough energy? Was there something wrong with her soul? Or was it because he had gradually absorbed the energy that she had injected into his body, causing her soul to be damaged? Because when Ting did not appear, Chi-yu could not help but let his imagination run wild. Towards Wen-ting, other than a deep love, he also felt a strong sense of guilt. If it was not because of him, Wen-ting would not have died. Therefore, among the most important women in Chi-yu's heart, Wen-ting was clearly ranked first. Tianxiang Mountain was one of the famous scenic spots in the capital city. Therefore, it was much greener than other places in the capital city. Here, where the aura of nature was relatively abundant, Chi-yu used about an hour to completely heal the injuries that Lung-er had inflicted on him. As his body recovered, he understood that Lung-er must have held back at the last moment when she struck him with her palm. Otherwise, even if he was also injured, his injuries would definitely be much more serious. Thinking of this, Chi-yu's feelings towards Lung-er changed slightly, and he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Regardless of which faction they belonged to, it didn't necessarily mean that they would appear according to their own faction. Just like Yamu and Lung-er, Yamu was the successor of Goddess Athena. However, in order to improve his strength, didn't she give up the little bit of relationship he had built up with great difficulty? even if she didn't kill him in the end out of guilt and regret, but her actions were completely unlike the gods that humans worshipped. What about Lungair? With her identity as the princess of hell, Ming Ming had already expressed that it was impossible for her to cooperate with hell, so she should have gotten rid of her. However, from the beginning to the end of the battle, she had held back. Even when Lucifer decided to kill her, Lungair appeared in time to stop him. Can you really call such a girl a demon? No, at least in Chi Yu's mind, the answer was definitely no. A faint light flickered. Chi Yu floated up from the ground. It was time to go back. He didn't tell Snow Girl before sneaking out for such a long time. She must have been very worried. What Chi Yu didn't know was that Snow Girl wasn't the only one who was worried about him. His parents had also stayed in the Dragonfield courtyard, waiting for his return. Taking out his spare clothes from the Kirin Pearl, Chi was about to fly back to the Dragonfield courtyard when the phone in his pocket rang. He took it out and was surprised to find that there were more than 10 missed calls on his phone, and all of them were from the same number. It was the one that was calling him now. He pressed the answer button. Who is it? Looking for me so impatiently. Chi Yu never had the habit of memorizing phone numbers. He thought that the person who kept calling him should be Snow Girl. However, unexpectedly, a kind voice came from the other side of the phone. Chi Yu? It's really not easy to find you. Master, is that you? That's right. The person who called was Master Zagalu, who had already returned to Tibet. Yes, it's me, Chi Yu. Do you have time recently? If you do, you'd better come to Tibet. I have something to tell you. Although Zagru's voice was very calm, Chi Yu could still hear some of his emotional anxiety. Even with Zagru's Buddha nature cultivation, this kind of situation could not help but make Chi Yu's heart sink. He said, Master, what's so urgent? Zagru said, It's not convenient to talk about this over the phone. You should talk about it when you get to Tibet. If you don't have time, I'll fly to the capital to find you. Chi Yu said without hesitation, No need, Master. I'll go find you. I'll leave now and try to reach Tibet tomorrow morning. After listening to Zagru's words, Chi Yu knew that this matter was not simple. Otherwise, Zagru would not have spoken so mysteriously. The privacy of things like mobile phones was actually not strong, especially with Chi Yu's current identity. His mobile phone was likely to be monitored by the state, so Zagru had asked him to go to Tibet in person. Chi Yu did not delay too much. After hanging up the phone, he directly used Kirin's invisibility skill to restrain his aura. Because the previous battle had consumed a lot of energy in his body, he did not fly by himself. Of course, it was impossible for him to take a plane. How could taking a plane be faster and more convenient than sitting on Little Pump? That was a real private plane. With the remaining energy, he expanded the effect of Kirin's invisibility to the size of Little Peng's body. Under its load, he quickly headed in the direction of Tibet. Chi was not worried that he would get lost. Although he did not know the exact location of Tibet, it was not a problem to find the general direction. As long as he got within a certain range of Master Zelu, he could directly find the Master based on the aura between the two of them. As Chi Yu flew towards Tibet, he did not forget Snow Girl. Sitting on Little Peng's back, he dialed the number of the Dragonfield courtyard. Snow Girl? It's me. Chi Yu, where are you? Snow Girl asked anxiously on the other side of the phone. Chi Yu smiled and said, What's wrong? We haven't seen each other for a while, and you already miss me? Snow Girl said unhappily, Well, now is not the time to joke. Come back quickly. Uncle and Auntie are waiting for you. Sitting on Little Peng's back, Chi Yu could not help but be stunned when he heard Snow Girl's words. Uncle and Auntie? Could it be them? After a moment of silence, Chi Yu asked, Have the results of their tests come out? Snow Girl said, They came out yesterday, but because you were cultivating yesterday, Uncle and Auntie did not disturb you. That's why Uncle and Auntie didn't disturb you. Who knew you would leave the monastery as soon as you finished cultivating? Where are you now? When can you come back? Although Snow Girl did not say it clearly. However, from her words, Chi Yu already knew that Chi Tianlei and Ing Shaodai had obviously recognized his identity through science. He was silent. At this time, even Chi Yu did not understand his own feelings. Being recognized by his parents should have been an extremely happy thing, but he did not know why. He just cannot be happy. Perhaps it was because there were too many twists and turns before they truly recognized each other. Chiyu, are you listening? Snow Girl clearly felt that something was wrong with Chiyu's breath. Chiyu nodded. He said, I'm listening. Snow Girl, I can't go back yet. Let them go back first. I have an urgent matter to attend to in Tibet. I didn't know when I would come back. Tell them not to worry. When I return, I will naturally look for them. Hearing Chiyu's words, Snow Girl couldn't help but have a strange feeling in her heart. Was he trying to escape? No. Chiyu was not a person who was used to running away. Even though the incident with Wenting was a huge blow to him, he could still pull himself together. With the development of the Zodiac guardian god's power as the source, he found his goal again. What could it be? Could there be some big trouble in Tibet? Chiyu, what are you going to Tibet for? Chiyu said with a wry smile. It's nothing big. It's just that Master asked me to go over and said that he has something to discuss with me. You also know Master's position among the Zodiac guardian god warriors. I must agree to his request. You deal with the affairs of Kirin Group at home. I will come back as soon as possible. Snow Girl tentatively asked, Why don't you use the phone to talk to Uncle and Auntie? They have been waiting for you all night. Hearing Snow Girl's words, Chiyu's heart seemed to skip a beat, but he still refused. Forget it. Everything will wait for me to come back. Help me tell them to pay more attention to their health. Bring some of the fruits produced by our company back for them. I think it should be helpful for their health. After all, they have worked hard for their careers all their lives. I'm hanging up. I might put the phone in the Kirin Pearl, so don't call me again. After saying that, Chiyu hung up. It was not that he was heartless. He was afraid that once he spoke to Chi Tianlei and his wife, he would immediately rush back to the Dragon Field courtyard. Although they had already recognized his identity, they still needed a certain amount of time to carefully test how to deal with the problems between them. Chiyu did not want to see Chi Tianlei and his wife do anything that he could not accept because of a moment of impulse. At the same time, he also needed to calm down. At least, before he really recognized his parents, Chiyu hoped that all the negative emotions in his heart could disappear. He doesn't want to talk to us? Ing Xiaodai looked at Snow Girl with tears in her eyes. Looking at her full of sadness, Snow Girl could not help but sigh softly and comforted her. Auntie, don't be like this. Chiyu is not a person who likes to hold a grudge. What's more, you're his family. He already understands what I mean, but he has something urgent to do now. He has to go to Tibet, so it's impossible for him to come back. I think he may also need to calm down. When he comes back from Tibet, everything will be fine. Ing Xiaodai turned around and threw herself into her husband's arms. She choked and said, It's all our fault. We hurt the child's heart. He has suffered so much, but we still treat him like that. Tianlei, what should we do now? Feeling his wife's sorrow, Chi Tianlei calmed down and said, Xiaodai, Chiyu is a sensible child. Lady Xuan Nu is right. He needs time to calm himself down and not bear a grudge against us. So many years have passed. You also know everything he has encountered in the past. Now, let's wait quietly for our son to return to us. We will definitely make up for everything he has lost with all our heart. Ing Xiaodai said sadly, but will he really give us a chance to make it up to him? Chi Tianlei seemed to have made up his mind. If you are really worried, why don't we go straight to Tibet to find him? Ing Xiaodai was stunned for a moment, but she still shook her head. This strong woman was still very rational after waking up from the sadness of family. Forget it, you're right. Let him calm down. Maybe he went to Tibet to avoid us. Why should we force him to be so anxious? Snow Girl, I'll call you Schwerer. I'll have to trouble you to inform us when Chiyu comes back, okay? Who were Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai? How could they not see the relationship between Snow Girl and Chiyu? In their hearts, they had already regarded Snow Girl as their daughter-in-law. Without their son, they had become even closer to her. It was as if they wanted to release all their feelings for Chiyu on Snow Girl. From Chi Tianlei and his wife, Snow Girl seemed to feel the scene of her whole family living happily on the snowy mountain. How wonderful that was! Unfortunately, everything was gone now. However, wasn't Chiyu's family also her family? Uncle, Auntie, don't worry. As soon as Chiyu comes back, I will definitely inform you immediately. No matter what happens to Chiyu, I will let you see him before we leave. Chi Tianlei was stunned and said, Leave? Where are you going? Abroad? Snow Girl shook her head and said, Uncle, you should already know that Chi-Yu is not an ordinary person. He has a lot of things to do, a lot of things that ordinary people can't imagine. So, after he comes back from Tibet, as long as our group's business is on track, we have to leave again. But you don't have to worry too much. After we leave this time, we'll be back in the middle of January at the latest, just in time for the Lunar New Year of the Yanhuang Republic. Chi Tianlei sighed and said, Contributing to the country is the responsibility of our generation of men. However, I'm afraid that what Chi-Yu is doing is a little too dangerous. When he comes back, it seems that I have to talk to him. Snow Girl smiled and said, Uncle, you may not fully understand, but what Chi-Yu does is not only under the orders of the country, but also because he has to do it. There was a movie that said that the more powerful a person is, the greater his responsibility. Chi-Yu is like this. He has strength far beyond ordinary people, so he has to do many things that ordinary people can't do. This is not an order, but a mission. It is something that he has to do. Uncle, Andy, you are also tired. Go back and rest early. Chi-Yu said that you must pay attention to your health. Chi-Yu asked me to bring these fruits back for you to taste. Although the price of our company's products is a little higher, they are indeed original fruits, which are extremely beneficial to the human body. As long as Uncle and Annie need them, I will send some to you every week in the future. As she spoke, Snow Girl picked up a VIP gift box produced by Kirin Group and handed it to the bodyguard behind Chi Tianlei. Chi Tianlei and his wife didn't have time to pay attention to the fruits now. Their minds were completely focused on Chi-Yu, who was far away. However, Snow Girl's action was also equivalent to a reminder to them. On one hand, it proved that Chi-Yu didn't bear a grudge against them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent them fruits. On the other hand, it also reminded them that the company established by their son had just started operating. Since their son was not here, then they would help him in this aspect. At least when their son came back and found out that the company's performance was good, his mood would always be better. Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai said goodbye to Snow Girl. They got into their luxury car and left Dragon Field Courtyard. Tianlei, I want to help you, Kirin Group. Ing Xiaodai couldn't wait to put forward her idea as soon as she closed the car door. Looking at his wife's anxious look, Chi Tianlei couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Ing Xiaodai rebuked. Chi Tianlei said, Xiaodai, you are indeed my good wife. This time, we have a tacit understanding again. Ing Xiaodai finally understood. So you also thought of it. Chi Tianlei's invisible majesty would only completely disappear in front of his wife. He laughed and said, If I can't even think of this, I don't deserve to be the chairman of the Golden Valley Group's board of directors. This time, we not only want to help Chi-Yu. At the same time, we can't let him know. Only in this way can we be considered to be doing the right thing. Ing Xiaodai was stunned, but she quickly understood. She smiled and said, At least you have some brains. The smart couple thought at the same time. From the few times they met, Chi was obviously a person with strong self-esteem. If they helped Kirin Group in all aspects, it might have the opposite effect. After all, anyone who started a business wanted to see their own success step by step instead of relying on the strength of others. Only in this way could something truly belong to them. Chi Tianlei took out his satellite phone and dialed a number. He said calmly, Immediately investigate the products that Kirin Group has just released, including all product analysis and product value estimates. I want to see the report on my desk before noon tomorrow. The more detailed, the better. As the leader of a large company, Chi Tianlei was very serious. Even if he wanted to help his own son secretly, he had to first find out the value of the products launched by Kirin Group this time. Only in this way could he better decide on a helping strategy. Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai quietly got busy for Chi-Yu in the capital. Meanwhile, Chi-Yu was sitting on the back of the golden-winged eagle, Little Peng, and was getting closer and closer to Tibet. Little Peng's full speed made even Chi-Yu sigh at his inferiority. It could be seen how fast it was. At least, ordinary civil aircraft were absolutely unable to compare with Little Peng. Probably only those high-tech fighter jets could compare with it. Chi restrained his mind and released his spiritual force to feel the aura of Master Zagru that could appear at any time. At the same time, he also used his spiritual force to perceive the energy in the air and used Kirin's ascending cloud technique to restore his thundercloud force. Through this battle with Lung Air and Lucifer, Chiyu had a deeper understanding of his own energy. He found that although the source of nature was a kind of neutral and peaceful energy and could also control plants to a certain extent, it was still a special form of energy. Moreover, it was also one of the easiest energies in the world to absorb and transform. And this kind of energy itself was not ideal for direct application. Energy like the source of nature must be combined with other energies in order to exert its greatest effect. For example, this time, after Chiyu's water thundercloud force was upgraded to the 8-cloud realm, he thought of combining it with the source of nature. The final result was a great surprise to him. The speed of his own healing had increased by at least 3 times. Moreover, it was the kind of treatment that ignored all injuries. Not only internal injuries, but even external injuries could also play a huge role. What did this prove? It proved that the water thundercloud force had undergone a qualitative change under the support of the source of nature. During the flight, Chiyu restored his thundercloud force while testing the effect of the fusion of the source of nature and his other kinds of thundercloud force. As a result, he was surprised to find that when a single kind of thundercloud force was fused with the source of nature, it was like a flame meeting oxygen, and the instantaneous effect was extremely amazing. However, there was also a limit. That was, when the source of nature increased, it could only increase one kind of energy. Once the energy appeared in a mixed form, although it would also have a supplementary effect, but the huge effect would disappear naturally. This was why Chiyu hadn't noticed it before. After returning to Dragonfield Courtyard from London, Zagru had a heart-to-heart talk with him, which reignited Chiyu's determination to pay attention to the application of his various thundercloud force. Before this, when Chiyu attacked, most of the time, he would choose to fuse several of his thundercloud force or use Kirin's origin energy and thundercloud force together, so he didn't discover the mystery of the natural source energy. At this moment, Chiyu couldn't help but be overjoyed. When a single thundercloud force was enhanced by the origin of nature, its effect would be magnified several times. In this case, the effect of a single thundercloud force would not be inferior to Kirin's origin energy, even when compared to Kirin's arm. It wouldn't be inferior by much. Moreover, by using thundercloud force in this way, under the stimulation of the origin of nature, he would have twice the result with half the effort when he cultivated. He could completely achieve the goal of improving thundercloud force in a shorter time. Since that's the case, why not? As the mystery of the origin of nature was comprehended by Chiyu, in his mind, a variety of ways to use the origin of nature to supplement his own energy began to appear. From these methods, Chiyu also got more and more inspiration. It was because of the enlightenment during this period of flight. It allowed him to truly enter the realm close to the God level, allowing him to really get close to the mystery of the 4 auspicious clouds, Ink Kirin. Little Peng's flying speed was really terrifying. When Chiyu arrived in Tibet, the sky was still dark. With the guidance of his mental power, Chiyu quickly found the location of the Holy Buddha Temple. However, he also clearly found that there was a huge Buddhist power guarding the temple. There was a powerful Buddhist power protecting it, preventing his mental power from penetrating it. But with Master Zagru's aura, it was enough for him. After keeping Little Peng in his Kirin bead, Chiyu floated down and slowly landed in front of the gate of the Holy Buddha Temple. Perhaps because of Master Zagru, or because the Sarira bead had saved him several times. Although Chiyu was a person without faith, he still respected Buddhism very much. Therefore, he didn't fly directly into the temple, but landed outside the gate. He didn't knock because there was no need. Chiyu stood in the darkness and released his Kirin's aura. He could feel Master Zagru's aura, and naturally, Zagru could also feel his aura. Therefore, what Chiyu needed to do now was to wait quietly. As expected, not long after, the gate opened and Zagru, who was dressed in white monk robes, walked out. When he saw Chiyu, he couldn't help but smile. "I thought I was wrong just now, but it turns out that you're really here. It seems that the speed at which your strength has increased has far exceeded my expectations. The miracles that happen to you can always make a monk like me, who should have been peaceful, have emotional fluctuations." Chiyu smiled and said, "Master, although you're a monk, you're also a person of flesh and blood. No one can remain calm forever." Zagru put his palms together. "Ba." Chiyu's words are also filled with Buddhist wisdom. "You're worth teaching. Come." As he spoke, he turned and walked into the Saint Buddha temple. Seeing Zagru, who was about the same age as him, walk in, Chiyu couldn't help but smile. Zagru was young, but he could always make Chiyu feel a sense of respect. The Buddhist energy on his body was completely restrained, but he emitted an invisible aura of peace, as if he could become one with heaven and earth. Zagru was the first person that Chiyu respected. Until now, this respect hadn't decreased in the slightest. The path to the Saint Buddha temple was still as steep as before. This was the second time that Chiyu had come here. Thinking back to the time when he took refuge in Tibet after beating up Yin Xiaoi, Chiyu couldn't help but smile even more. It really was heaven's will. It allowed him to meet Zagru, and it was also because he came to this Saint Buddha temple that he possessed such great power. Feeling the peaceful aura in the temple, Chiyu couldn't help but sincerely thank heaven for his kindness. He really didn't dare to imagine what he would choose if he returned to his previous self. Even if all of this would make his life only a tenth of what it used to be, Chiyu wouldn't have the slightest bit of regret. As long as he could blossom brilliantly in his life, it was enough for him. After all, after inheriting Kiran's bloodline, he had seen too many unbelievable things, which made his life full of color again. Zagru brought Chiyu to a place that he was very familiar with. It was the hall where he raised his level in the past. The heavy door had no effect on Chiyu, and the candlelight in the hall made him feel as if he had entered ancient times. After closing the door, Chiyu followed Zagru to the prayer mat in the center of the hall and sat down. "Grandmaster, why are you in such a hurry to find me? What happened?" Zagru looked at Chiyu with a trace of deep worry in his eyes. "Chiyu, because I saw the future." Chiyu was taken aback. "Grandmaster, so you have such a powerful ability. Why haven't I heard you mention it before?" Zagru shook his head. "This isn't my ability, but a premonition, a very bad premonition." At this moment, Zagru didn't look like a young man in his 20s at all. Instead, he looked more like an enlightened monk. A faint Buddhist light surrounded his body. Chiyu didn't interrupt and listened to Zagru. "After I returned from the capital, I meditated for 7 days and recalled everything that happened during my time in the secular world. My teacher was right. The Buddhist Dharma is boundless, but it needs to be cultivated in the secular world. Perhaps you didn't feel anything, but being with you for less than a year was extremely important to me. After I returned from the capital, I meditated for 7 days and made a huge breakthrough in my cultivation of the Buddhist Dharma. However, this only brought me worry. Through my Buddhist Dharma and the Buddha's instructions, I had a premonition that in the near future, our world would probably face a huge disaster. It was this sudden premonition that made me understand why there were so many powerful beings in our era. In the past, although the Pope of the Vatican was definitely a powerful existence, the Pope and the cardinals could only summon ordinary angels. However, they could now summon the archangel. In the Greek Empire, it was no longer an ordinary deity who descended. It was the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, and her 12 constellation guardians, who had the strongest combat ability. In the East, you, the unprecedented ink Kiran of the 4 auspicious clouds, have appeared. Your powerful strength also proves that you will definitely face an extremely terrifying existence. Your arrival is completely in preparation for a rainy day, and the real disaster is about to descend. Not only will it be a disaster for humans, but it will also be a disaster for all living things in this world. Once the disaster comes, if we can't effectively stop it, I'm afraid. Chapter 250. Zagru nodded and said, "Although I can't guess what the real disaster is, the final outcome is very likely to be the destruction of the earth. This requires the experts who guard the East and the West to rely on your strength to turn the tide. It's not because you are the saviors of this era, but for your own survival in this world, for your family and friends, you have to do this. Chiyu thought for a while and said, Master, not long ago, I met people from hell. Zagru was shocked and said, Hell? What happened? Then Chiyu told him how he met Lung'er, everything that happened in the Dark Parliament, and the battle with Lung'er and Lucifer tonight in detail. Master, is the crisis that you predicted referring to hell? Once the great demonic god Satan leads his army of hell to the human world, it is indeed possible to destroy the human race. However, that doesn't seem to be the destruction of the earth. From what Lung'er said, it seems that they are from another plane. What they want to do is to conquer our world, not to destroy it. Moreover, although hell is powerful, in the West, the Vatican and the God that they believe in have been their enemy for thousands of years. To be able to resist for such a long time, if the earth wants to descend to the human world, the Vatican and the guys above them will not sit by and watch. I think it is almost impossible for hell to rule the world. I don't know how strong other people are, but I am very clear about Yama's situation. She was able to fight me to a standstill even before she had fully inherited the goddess Athena's divine seat, nor had she obtained all of Athena's god equipment. Not only that, she was willing to use my life to achieve her goals in order to obtain even greater power. It was evident just how terrifying the amount of power she could obtain was. Even if hell comes, Yamu and her constellation guardians will definitely be able to display their great fighting power. At that time, it is hard to say who will be the winner. Zagru shook his head and said, Although what you said is right, you have not fully understood what I mean. The crisis I am referring to is not limited to the West. The hell you just mentioned is just a Western name for the dark world. It's not the hell full of death and souls that we imagine. Hell descended on the human world. Perhaps it was one of the dangers, but it was definitely not the only one. Only the guardians of the West would cause trouble. As for the final outcome, that's not something we can judge. Chiyu was startled. Grandmaster, you mean to say that there are existences like the Western Hell? Will it appear in the East as well? And that is our real threat. Zagru said, You could say that. But it seemed that this was still not all. Even I couldn't guess what my premonition was. I can only feel that the danger is so great that it is definitely not something that a single person can resist. Not even Empyrean gods. Chiyu thought for a moment, then said, No matter what the danger is, we have to be careful. Before it appears, it is useless for us to make too many guesses. Ever since I returned from London, I've been thinking that regardless of what we'll face in the future, the most important thing for us now is to improve our overall strength. Only by becoming stronger will we be able to effectively resist any crisis that arises. After you left, I have already brought the youngsters of the 4 major clans to the ancient giant beast era and have achieved some results. I think that when they return to this world again, our East will become even stronger. Oh, by the way, I also have good news for you. The effect of training in the ancient giant beast era is better than I imagined. The strength of our Zodiac guardian god warriors has already broken through the 5 clouds realm and can now use the Zodiac guardian domain. However, because the domain requires too much energy to activate, and the energy of the domain itself is also too great, it is very difficult to control, and we still need a certain amount of time to train before we can fully display its power. After hearing Chiyu's good news, not only was Zagru not happy, the worry on his face deepened. Sigh, perhaps the improvement of your strength is more in line with my premonition. I can only tell you that even after you have improved your strength, it is still not enough. Do you know what is the strongest point of my premonition? Speaking of it, it is simply inconceivable. Chiyu was stunned and said, What on earth can make your Buddha nature be in danger of losing control? Zagru's aura was obviously not right. This was already noticed by Chiyu when they first met. Even with his Buddha nature, at this moment, he could not dispel his worry, just like an ordinary person. Then, that premonition of his was too terrifying. Zagru smiled bitterly. In my premonition, the clearest thing is that when the greatest crisis comes, all the forces in the world will unite to fight against it. Not only the East and West protectors will unite, but also your enemies. In my premonition, it is the combination of darkness and light to fight against that huge crisis together. That's why I have such a judgment. Chiyu looked at Zagru dumbfounded and said, Master, do you mean that the Vatican may cooperate with the Dark Parliament, or even with the great demon king Satan? No. How is this possible? Even if a world war breaks out, and nuclear weapons are widely used, it is impossible for such a situation to occur. The leaders of the various countries have not become crazy. Zagru sighed and said, This is also what I do not understand, but it is still too early to say these things. What you said just now is right. Before the real crisis comes, all we can do is to constantly strengthen our strength to prepare for what is coming. Chiyu, do you know the real reason why I asked you to come here today? Chiyu thought for a while and said, Master, you should want to predict the possible enemies of the East protectors with me, right? There are demons in the West. So will our East be? Speaking of this, the first thing that came to Chiyu's mind was not Chiyu in the ancient behemoth period, but the old bull in his body. The old bull was indeed too powerful. Even Lucifer did not stand a chance against him. Although there was the life and death domain, who could guarantee that such a powerful old bull could not think of a solution? Zagru shook his head and said, No, I did not ask you to come here for this matter. There is no point in guessing. Any plan must be based on the changes. Making wild guesses before the changes appear will only mess up our plans. Chiyu looked at him in surprise and said, Then what is it for? I can't guess. Zagru looked deeply at Chiyu. Looking at his hesitant look, Chiyu laughed heartily and said, Master, we are all on the same side. We're all on the same side, so if you have something to say, just say it. Don't tell me you still don't believe in my ability to bear it. Even if the world is really going to be destroyed, it is not my problem alone. If the sky falls, there's still a tall person holding it up. There are many people who do not want the world to be destroyed. Tell me, why did you ask me to come here? Zagru looked at Chiyu, and the light in his eyes gradually became gentle. The light in his eyes gradually became gentle. Chiyu, answer a question of mine first. Chiyu nodded and said, Speak. Zagru said, If. One day, your family and friends are facing a huge crisis, and they may face the threat of death at any time. Your power cannot save them. At this time, only your enemy can save them. In this case, what will you choose? Chiyu looked at Zagru and could not help but frown, but he still said without hesitation, If that day really comes, even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will do my best to beg my enemy to save my family and friends. Even if I know it is impossible, I will still do it. After all, that is the only chance. Hearing Chiyu say this, Zagru's eyes revealed a smile of admiration. Good. You are indeed the heir of Kirin's bloodline. If you can think like this, then I am relieved. This time, I asked you to come, is to resolve the hatred in your heart. Chiyu's heart moved, as if he had understood something, but he did not say anything, and only quietly looked at Zagru. Zagru said, When the real crisis comes, whether it is us or the West, facing it alone, the final result may be a tragedy. Maybe my premonition is wrong, but if my premonition is right, then the outcome will definitely be terrible, and we will not be able to bear it. Therefore, in order to be able to gather a greater power to deal with everything that may happen, we need to unite more power. I know that you put in a lot of effort to improve the young people of the 4 big families in preparation to strengthen the Easter Guardian in the future. However, you should also understand that in the East, there are only 13 people with innate talent like you and our Zodiac Guardian warriors. Only you can achieve super strength through a short period of cultivation. Although the young people of the 4 big families are already considered superhuman among ordinary people, compared to you, they're still too far away, and it is absolutely impossible for them to improve to your level. Because most of the power that you possess can be said to be given by the heavens because of your mission. Only you, the real powerhouses of the East. When the crisis becomes a global one, to better fight against it, we can't just rely on our own strength. Just now, you said that when hell comes, there will be Athena and the Vatican to stop it. But have you thought about what if hell destroys them? No matter what the next target is, one day they will attack the East. No matter how bad Athena and the Vatican are. After all, they belong to our world and have only obtained some power. This is the same as you. They will not be able to invade the territory of the Yanhuang Republic. Once the great demonic god Satan destroys them and attacks the East, and the East faces the problem of the East, then faced with the simultaneous attack of both sides, will you be able to deal with it? Stop it, Chiyu suddenly growled, interrupting Zagru's words. He had already understood what Zagru meant. Master, other things can be discussed, but this matter cannot be discussed. You already know what happened to me in the West. Why don't you think about it? Even if I can agree to your suggestion, can my brothers? How can I explain this to my brothers, to Wenting, and to my own heart? Chiyu's emotions had already become abnormally agitated. He knew that after Zagru said so much, there was only one point, and that was he hoped that he could lead the Zodiac Guardian God warriors to cooperate with the Guardians of the West, regardless of the past. This had already crossed the bottom line that Chiyu could accept, and that was why his reaction was so intense. Looking at Chiyu's red eyes, Zagru could not help but sigh. Chiyu, have you forgotten how you answered my question just now? You said that if only your enemy can save your family and friends, you will beg your enemy at all costs. Now, the Vatican and Yamu are your enemies, and when danger comes, they are likely to become an important force to save your family and friends. Can't you think it through? After all, Chiyu was mature. After his emotional outburst just now, he began to calm down, and the red light in his eyes gradually disappeared. Master, you don't have to say anymore. I completely understand what you mean. However, you should also know that I am a selfish person. Even if I am not selfish, do you think I can cooperate with people who have cheated on my feelings, wanted to take my life, and caused the death of my beloved wife? At least I can't do that. I'm not a god. I am just a human. Even if I have the blood of Kirin, I am still a human. I don't have that kind of magnanimity. Towards the Holy See in Greece, I only had one understanding. From the moment I left London, they would only be my enemies. Of course, if you can persuade other brothers and sisters to agree to cooperate with them, I will not object. After all, this is only my own business. When that time comes, I will choose to withdraw from the list of the Zodiac Guardian Gods and only rely on my own strength to do what I want to do and what I must do. Chiyu's words were resolute, and there was no room for negotiation. Looking at the resolute light in Chiyu's eyes, Zagru could not affect his determination no matter how strong his Buddha's power was. Hatred is indeed the most terrifying emotion. Chiyu, since you've already made up your mind, then I have nothing to say. Let's leave everything to fate. I hope that when the danger that I foresee comes, you can lead everyone out of it. Looking at Zagru's sorrowful eyes, Chiyu could not help but soften his heart. He sighed and said, Master, I am sorry. I know that you are doing this for our own good. However, I, Chiyu, am a man. I have my own dignity, and I also have Kirin's dignity. In this lifetime, we are destined to be enemies' opponents. There can no longer be any changes. Even if the world is destroyed, it will not change. Zagru looked at Chiyu, nodded lightly, and said, All right, I understand. Since that is the case, I will not persuade you any further. Chiyu, I know that you're not only a smart person, but also a person who is very emotional. As a friend, I only hope that when you encounter something, you can prioritize the safety of your family and friends. You must not let your emotions affect your decisions and cause irreversible consequences. Chiyu nodded lightly and said, Thank you, I understand. Master, if that day really comes, I will naturally make my own choice. However, I have a question that I have always wanted to ask you. Since I am here today, I might as well ask. Zagru said, Go ahead. Chiyu said, Master, what I don't understand is why there are so-called gods and demons in the West, and they are gradually appearing. For example, the goddess Athena that Yamu inherited, the Pope of the Vatican and the cardinals summoned the Archangel, the Dark Parliament summoned the terrifying Demon King, and even the great demon god Satan and the fallen angel Lucifer. And we are in the East. Why do we not have such existences? According to the myths and legends, we in the East also have our own gods and Buddhas. Why can't these gods and Buddhas save the world when the crisis comes? Looking at Chi Yu's puzzled gaze, Zagru could not help but be stunned for a moment. He smiled bitterly and said, "It is really difficult for me to answer your question." Chi Yu said, "Then do we have real gods and Buddhas in China?" Zagru gave a wry smile and said, "If everything is just a legend, then why can you get the power of the samsara fruit? Why can you become the origin of nature? Why can you get the ancient artifact Xianyuan sword? Is all of this something that can be explained by human strength?" Chi Yu asked, "So you're saying that gods and Buddhas exist? But when the gods and Buddhas see the suffering of the world, where are they? Why don't they appear and help us solve all the problems?" Zagru nodded gently. He said, "Since you have already asked these questions, then let me explain it to you. Even if it will reveal the secrets of heaven, I don't care. After all, you are the head of the Guardians of the East, and there are some things that you should know. Chi Yu, let me ask you, in your knowledge, who is the most powerful god and Buddha in our Eastern mythology?" Chi Yu thought for a while. He said, "I don't know much about mythology, but from the description of the TV and novels I have watched before, it seems to be the Jade Emperor and the Buddha. The Jade Emperor is the emperor of the gods. As for the Tathagata Buddha, he is the greatest Buddha of your Buddhist school. They should be the top existences in the mythology." Zagru smiled slightly, shook his head, and said, "No, you are wrong. But you know almost the same as ordinary people. But this is not the real source of our Yanhuang Republic's mythology, and not the real God King of the Yanhuang Republic." Chi Yu looked at him in surprise and said, "Then who should the real God be? Can you tell me now?" Zagru said, "Everything you know is really just a legend. As the heaven's guide of this generation, when my cultivation ended, I really absorbed the Buddhist power left by all the senior monks and opened the eye of heaven's guide, which allowed me to see a lot of things. You are right. Our Yanhuang Republic also has many gods of our own. Be it the Jade Emperor or the Tathagata Buddha, they all existed. But they're not the most powerful gods, or rather, they are just the servants of the gods. For the sake of their own reputation, they find ways to leave their good names in the world. And most of these gods in the world are just the last gods. Even your current strength surpasses most of them." Chi Yu looked at Zagru, dumbfounded. He did not expect that Zagru would give him such an answer. For a moment, he did not know what to say. The light in his eyes became a little blank. "Master, I don't quite understand what you mean." "Umitba," Zagru said indifferently. "For example, the Buddhists pay attention to compassion, and at the same time, they also promote the Dharma that is good and beneficial to mankind. But the birth of the Buddhists is much later than the gods. In other words, after the gods, the Buddhists gradually appeared. The Buddhists themselves are a special branch of the gods, but they are not interfered with by the gods. Even though I'm a Buddhist, I have to admit all this." The more Chi Yu listened, the more surprised he became, and the light in his eyes flickered. Since Zagru, a senior monk of Buddhism, said so, all of this was very credible. But all this was far from what he had always understood. "Master, what kind of existence are the real gods, the really powerful gods?" Zagru said, "In a sense, the gods of the East are the real gods of this world, and they're also the gods who created this world. Those gods of the West, in fact, gradually appeared after the appearance of the Eastern gods. A long, long time ago, at the beginning of chaos, our Earth and even the solar system were only in a state of free energy. And in the billions of years of evolution, two huge masses of energy appeared in the solar system. These two masses of energy, after millions of years of condensation, began to develop intelligence. As for them, there are ancient gods, the true gods. These two incomparably huge masses of energy have opposite attributes, and they also oppose each other. This is the main reason why they have always been in a state of hostility. Their attributes, one is fire and the other is water. When their energy reached a state of saturation, the fire and water energies finally collided violently. Resulting in an intense explosion and energy mutation. That's how our world came to be. Then the solar system appeared, and then 9 planets revolving around the solar system appeared. Although these two masses of energy are nothing compared to the whole universe, if not for their collision, there would not be what we have now. Qiyu asked impatiently, "So who are they?" Zagru said, "In the history of the Yanhuang Republic, who are the gods named after fire and water respectively?" Qiyu was stunned. He thought for a while and said, "Are you talking about the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong?" Zagru smiled and nodded. "Yes, it's them. They're the real gods, the super gods who created our world." Qiyu looked at Zagru, dumbfounded. He did not expect that the human world, and even the entire solar system, were the creators. It turned out to be these two legendary gods. In the legend of the Yanhuang Republic, because the fire god Zhurong and the water god fought together, they broke the sky, causing great changes in the world. In the end, Goddess Nviwa sacrificed her life to mend the broken sky, creating the current human world. She created the current human world, and Goddess Nviwa was the legendary ancestor of the human race. But now, everything that Zagru said was obviously not the case. Everything was completely different from what he had imagined. Zagru's explanation of the myths and legends aroused a strong interest in Qiyu. Zagru continued, "After the collision of the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong, because of the huge amount of energy, they created this world. Because of the energy mutation, their intelligence suddenly went from elementary to advanced. However, their energy had also been greatly affected by the collision between them and had been greatly weakened. Although they had intelligence, they did not have enough energy, so they could only be confined to the entire solar system, unable to leave. Because of the attributes of the book, the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong began to have conflicts. While they recovered their divine power, they continued to fight in this solar system. Millions upon millions of years passed in this manner. The universe is a wonderful world. In the process of their continuous battle, the third planet of the 9 planets of the solar system began to show signs of life. And this planet is our Earth. With the continuous evolution, low-level creatures began to appear on Earth. After countless years of development, the low-level creatures turned into plants. After repeated transformations, the ancestors of the human race finally appeared. At this time, the battle between the water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong had also continued to a certain extent. After the continuous fighting between the two of them, they realized that there was not much difference in their strength. No matter how they continued to fight, there would not be a result. Moreover, because of the huge consumption caused by the battle, they could not recover to their original peak state. Therefore, they chose to stop fighting at the same time. At this time, both Gonggong and Zhurong had discovered the life on Earth. Therefore, they thought of many things. Since life could appear on Earth as a huge energy body, they could naturally create life in the form of energy. As long as they could have such an army, they would naturally be able to destroy the other party. Perhaps because Gonggong and Zhurong appeared in this world at the same time, they actually had the same idea. They acted at the same time and started the process of creating gods. Creating gods? Are the legendary gods of the Yanhuang Republic created by them? Qiyu asked curiously. Zagru nodded and said, "You can say that, but you can also say that they are not. The water god Gonggong and the fire god Zhurong first created an energy life with intelligence. During the process of creation, they realized that it was very easy to create an energy life. It was easy to create an energy body with life, but it was extremely difficult to give it intelligence. Therefore, in the process of continuous creation, after countless failures, they only managed to create one each. Their failed creations were directly abandoned and thrown into the solar system, becoming a byproduct. However, how could they have known that it was the byproducts of their creation that, after continuous mutation and evolution, eventually possessed their own intelligence, which was the so-called gods of the West? Some of them were strong, while others were weak. However, compared to Gonggong and Zhurong, they were simply incomparable. There were many weaker gods. When the two intelligent life forms created by Gonggong and Zhurong were completed, the battle between the two gods started again. This time, they brought their own helpers. However, what made them not know whether to laugh or cry was that the result was still the same as before. Neither of them could do anything to the other. The energy bodies they created were still as powerful as before. Neither of them could destroy the other. This evolved into a situation where both sides suffered losses. The two gods they created were the first two gods that human beings knew. The one created by the fire god Zhurong was Nuwa, who was known as the mother of mankind. The one created by the water god Gonggong was Pangu. During the battle between the two gods, Pangu once displayed his great power and left a vision in the human world. In the end, it was misunderstood by human beings as Pangu splitting the sky and the earth. Therefore, the legend of Pangu splitting the sky and splitting the chaos came into being. As for the legend of Nuwa, it might be because she was too beautiful. Moreover, Nuwa's weapon was the Nuwa stone that she made herself. Coupled with people's association, the legend of Nuwa mending the sky came into being. Gonggong, the water god, and Zhurong, the fire god, had only appeared in the human world for a short period of time. Therefore, not many people remember them. Therefore, in the legends of human beings, they are not as famous as Goddess Nviwa and Pangu. Chiyu understood and said, I see. Then what happened after the battle? There must be a winner in the end. Chapter 251. Chiyu looked at Zagru in shock. Cleanse? Could it be that the two great gods actually killed the gods of the East? It's no wonder so many problems have appeared in the world. Western god fiends have appeared, but our side is so calm. Zagru sighed and said, That's right. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, the two great gods absorbed the energy of the gods back into their own bodies and erased their wisdom. But in order to prevent the East from being affected and not be suppressed by the West, they left behind a branch god, which is the Buddha that I believe in. The two deities repeatedly told Buddha that no matter when, he must never get involved in the affairs of Earth. Otherwise, the seal left in his body would explode. At the same time, in order to prevent the imbalance between the East and the West, the two great gods gave Buddha a certain amount of divine power, allowing him to guide the rapid development of humans in the East. It is precisely because of this that our Yin Huang Republic has existed for 5,000 years. In ancient times, our development was far ahead of the Western world. Chiyu frowned. If that's the case, how do we solve the problem of God? After all, we don't have gods. Those gods in the West can eventually transfer a part of their power to Earth. Once they want to do something to the East, how can we deal with it? Zagru smiled faintly and said, The two great gods possess great wisdom. How could they overlook this? Although there were no true gods in the East, there were ancient beasts in the East that the West did not have. These were left behind by the two great gods. At the same time, because of the primordial beasts, the two great gods condensed their great power and created 10 divine weapons to intimidate the East and maintain the balance between the primordial beasts. With the overall strength of the ancient beasts and the 10 divine artifacts, the humans of the East could rely on these advantages to fight against the West. Therefore, even though we don't have any gods in the East, it's still very difficult for the West to defeat us and obtain anything. Chi let out a long sigh. So there are actually so many reasons. But Great Master, if that's the case, then the expert from the East shouldn't be weaker than those from the West. But why does the West have so many experts, while our East has nothing? Zagru shook his head and said, No, you are wrong. The East is not completely without anything. It is just that your strength is far from enough. Furthermore, regardless of whether it was the East or the West, they had their own systems. For example, the West had light, while the East had darkness. They would always fight against each other. On the other hand, in the East, there are divine beasts and ferocious beasts, and divine beasts and ferocious beasts can be used by people. They're also opposing each other. Humans in the West can activate the power of the gods and demons, but we humans in the East can also use the power of the 10 great divine weapons to resist the invasion of all threats. It's just that your strength hasn't reached that level yet. Otherwise, With your strength as the king of the Zodiac, you would definitely be able to contend against the gods and demons of the West. You just said that the fallen angel Lucifer couldn't fight back at all under the Bull Demon King's attack. This proves that the Bull Demon King's power has reached the level of a god. If you can become a powerful being of his, you will also become a god. She nodded and said, so that's how it is. In that case, the most important things in the East are the 10 great divine weapons. No wonder Lung Air's so-called infernal weapon was no match for the Xinyuan sword. And this is under the condition that Xuanyuan's soul is no longer there. Zagru stood up and said, come with me. This time, I called you to Tibet because there are some things I want you to see. A crisis is coming. As an outsider, I can only use it to help you. As he spoke, Zagru walked toward the back of the hall. Chiyu followed Zagru around the Buddha statue inside the hall. He was surprised to find that behind the Buddha statue, there was actually a lot of space. Chiyu followed Zaglu around the Buddha statue in the inner part of the hall. To his surprise, there was still quite a space behind the Buddha statue. Furthermore, a special Buddha statue was also enshrined in the innermost area. It was only 1 meter tall and seemed to be a monk, but there was an invisible energy aura around it. It was only 1 meter tall and looked like a monk, but there was an invisible energy aura around it. That was definitely the purest Buddhist energy. She was sure of this. Zagru walked in front of the Buddha statue and put his palms together in front of his chest. Amipa, Bodhisattva, Mahakasyapa. A faint Buddhist aura gradually shone, and a spot of white light gathered in front of Zagru. A huge amount of Buddhist energy filled the entire hall. Chiyu naturally recognized that it was Zagru's living Sarira. The Buddhist aura shone brightly. The Buddha statue in front of him looked even more solemn. A circle of faint white light also emitted from the Buddha statue. Chiyu felt his body tense up, as if he was bound by something. However, his body became very comfortable. In the next moment, everything in front of him changed. When Chiyu's 6 senses recovered from their momentary daze, he was surprised to find that he was in another place. It was no longer darkness in the hall. Everything around him was lit up. At the same time, the scenery in front of him became unusually beautiful. It was a grassland. A faint light flickered, and every time it flashed, the scenery in front of him seemed to change. From afar, Chiyu found that the road in front of him seemed to be blocked by a huge mountain, and the huge mountain in front of him was actually plain. Zagru appeared beside Chiyu out of nowhere. He patted him on the shoulder and said, come, let's go up and take a look. Although they were in this strange world, it did not affect their ability to fly. They rose into the air, and in the blink of an eye, they were already in midair. In midair, Chiyu found that there was not 1 mountain below him, but 5. The 5 huge mountains formed a special shape. Among them, the mountain in the east was the green mountain they had seen earlier, the mountain in the west was golden, the mountain in the north was blue, the mountain in the south was red, and the mountain in the middle was earthy yellow. Zagru said, these 5 mountains represent the 5 Emperor of Heaven. Back then, when the 2 great gods Gong Gong and Zhu Rong were purging the gods of the west, they subdued the 5 Emperor of Heaven under the Jade Emperor. They combined their powers and created one of the 10 great divine weapons. The 5 Emperor of Heaven represent the East, first, second, and would respectively, which is the green mountain you saw earlier. There is also the West Gongxin metal, the North Ringu A water, the South Bingding fire, and the Central Wuji earth. Based on their attributes, you should be able to determine the 5 mountains below. Chiyu's eyes lit up. Thinking of the 10 great divine weapons in Zagru's words, he immediately realized what the divine weapon Zagru was talking about was. A divine weapon that can summon the 5 Emperor of Heaven should be the Kong Tong seal, which is ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons. Right? Zagru smiled and said, yes, it is the Kong Tong seal. The Kong Tong seal was actually formed by the energy of the 5 Emperor of Heaven, so it has the appearance of the 5 Emperor of Heaven. At the same time, there is a jade dragon coiling around it. It can be used to summon the immortal divine dragon to protect it. It is one of the most powerful treasures among the 10 great divine weapons. One of its main functions is to protect the immortal divine dragon, and the other is to change the 5 elemental attributes of the 5 Emperor of Heaven's energy. When you use it, as long as you have enough energy, you can summon the 5 Emperor of Heaven's energy, and an undying domain will appear. In a sense, this domain is an absolute domain. Of course, the appearance of an absolute domain will inevitably lead to certain problems. That is, the energy consumption of this domain is incomparably huge. However, once the undying domain is launched, whoever the user wants to protect, as long as they are within the range of the undying domain, then they will absolutely not die. They can be completely immune to any form of attack. This is absolute immortality. Chiyu's eyes lit up, and he said, "Great Master, so the place you brought me to is the special plane where the Kongtong seal is sealed? Can I get the Kongtong seal with a trace of you?" Zagru said, "That's right, that's what I mean. Today, I asked you to come to Tibet to find me. One reason is to persuade you to cooperate with the Western Guardians as much as possible, and the other is that the time is ripe. After I opened the Eye of Heaven's attraction, I finally found this place, and also found the way to get the Kongtong seal. In order for you to better face the enemies that might appear in the future, I hope that you can obtain this divine weapon. Don't underestimate the Kongtong seal. Although it is ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons, its true power is extremely great. In other words, each of the 10 great divine weapons has its own absolute uniqueness. For example, the sharpness and overbearingness of the Xianyuan sword and the Pangu axe. The Eastern Emperor Bell can communicate with heaven and earth, and the Kunlun mirrors can travel through time. These abilities cannot be imitated by other divine weapons, other than the Xianyuan sword and the Pangu axe, which are somewhat similar in a sense. The other divine weapons are different in all aspects. Among the 10 great divine weapons, any one of them is definitely a unique super treasure. Of course, Chi would not underestimate the Kongtong seal. No matter what its ranking was, it was still one of the 10 great divine weapons. With the Xianyuan sword, his strength had already increased by several times. If he also had the undying domain of the Kongtong seal, then his strength would definitely become even more powerful. At that time, he would no longer have to be afraid of the gods and devils of the West. "Great Master, how can I get the Kongtong seal?" Chiyu asked eagerly and excitedly. Looking at Chiyu's impatient appearance, Zagru couldn't help but laugh. You're always so impatient. Don't worry, apart from you, no one else in this world can get the Kongtong seal. For others, it's absolutely impossible to obtain it, even if they know how to obtain it. However, for you, it's an extremely easy task. Chi was stunned and said, "Easy? How can it be easy?" He was very clear about the power of the 10 great divine weapons. In order to get the Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors, he had gone through countless trials and tribulations. He had even narrowly escaped death. In the end, he only succeeded with the help of luck. Now that Zagru said that it would be very easy for him to get the Kongtong seal, how could Chiyu believe him? Zagru smiled and said, "Wait until I explain the reason, then you will naturally understand. Do you still remember the story about the gods that I told you just now? Actually, I didn't really see them from the sky. This story is actually imprinted in the Kongtong 5 Elements Mountain. Because I'm a heavenly guide, I received the blessings of Buddha. Therefore, although I can't get the Kongtong seal from here, I won't be attacked by the restrictions that seal the Kongtong seal. This allowed me to peep into the secrets of the gods and Buddhas in the 5 Elements Divine Mountain. Speaking of which, when I saw this, I almost lost my Buddhist heart." Looking at Zagru's frightened expression, Chiyu couldn't help but laugh. "Great Master, quickly tell me, how can I get the Kongtong seal?" Zagru said back then, when the 2 great gods Gonggong and Zhurong created the 10 great divine weapons, they originally didn't want to leave all of them in the East. They only wanted to leave 1 or 2. However, later on, they discovered that there was an imbalance between the divine weapons. In order to not have any competitive spirit, they decided to leave all of the 10 great divine weapons in the East. However, there were also restrictions in their seals. That is, The 10 great divine weapons absolutely cannot appear at the same time. No matter when, at most, 5 of the 10 great divine weapons can appear in this world. When the 10 great divine weapons were created, why was it said that there was an imbalance? That's because among the 10 great divine weapons, Zhurong created 6, while Gonggong only created 4. If he didn't leave all of the 10 great divine weapons in the human world, in terms of overall strength, Zhurong would surpass Gonggong. Chiyu, what does this have to do with me getting the Kong Tong seal? Zagru smiled and said, of course it has to do with the Kong Tong seal, because the divine weapons are also divided into camps, and they belong to different camps. It's absolutely impossible for one person to get 2. Among the 10 great divine weapons, the divine weapons that can only be obtained by humans were all created by Zhurong, and the divine weapons that don't have any restrictions were created by Gonggong. Chiyu said, so you're saying that my Xianyuan sword was created by the great god Zhurong, and Chiyu's Pangu axe was created by the great god Gonggong? Hearing Chiyu's words, Zagru couldn't help but change his expression. What did you say? What Chiyu's Pangu axe? Chiyu said, after we arrived at the ancient giant beast age, after a period of training, I was prepared to bring everyone to fight against the Zhuli tribe to increase their combat experience. However, I didn't expect to meet Chiyu in the battle against the Zhuli tribe. Chiyu didn't die at that time. After he recovered from his injuries, he actually spent a long time looking for a Pangu axe that could fight against the Xianyuan sword. In the end, he actually succeeded. I learned a lot from the battle with Chiyu. However, his Pangu axe is indeed powerful. In terms of quality, it's not inferior to the Xianyuan sword at all. Chiyu briefly told him what happened during the era of the ancient beasts when he led the Zodiac army. After listening to Chiyu, Zagru couldn't help but frown. Chiyu, I suddenly realized a problem. Perhaps the history of the ancient beasts has been changed because of your appearance. Chiyu was stunned. That can't be. I didn't do anything. Even when I helped the humans fight against the Zhuli people, I was only assisting them. I didn't intend to destroy the Zhuli people. In the end, we still have to rely on the humans of that era to defeat the Zhuli people. Zagru shook his head. No, you're wrong. Facts have proven that you have indeed affected that era. Haven't you done anything yet? You obtained a Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors. This has already had a huge impact on the entire era of the ancient beasts. You've also allowed them to come into contact with some things that belong to our modern era. These will have an impact on the era of the ancient beasts. More importantly, you've even taken in the Bull Demon King, a powerful, ferocious beast of that era, as your servant. This has caused the entire situation to change. Perhaps this is also the reason why Chiyu was able to reappear. After listening to Zagru's words, Chiyu couldn't help but shiver. Great Master, what should I do now? Will the changes in the era of the ancient beasts affect our current era? Zagru pondered for a moment. At least for now, it doesn't seem to be a big problem. I think that even if you've changed some aspects of that era, as long as the overall situation hasn't changed, it won't affect our current era. In other words, in the battle against the Zhuli people, the humans must obtain the final victory, and the ancient beasts will eventually disappear under the influence of the humans. Chiyu heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. Now that the Zodiac army is helping the humans, even with Chiyu's leadership, it won't be easy for the Zhuli people to take advantage of them. Zagru sighed and said, if it was just the Chiyu of the past, perhaps there wouldn't be any problems. However, the situation is different now. Chiyu has obtained Pangu's axe, allowing him to become even more powerful than before. Pangu's axe is the strongest offensive weapon created by the great god Gonggong. How can the enormous energy contained in it be ordinary? Once Chiyu is able to unleash the full power of Pangu's axe, the era of the ancient beasts will definitely face a disaster. Because of Chiyu's hatred for the humans, this disaster will be even greater than when the Bull Demon King existed. Now, only you and the Xianyuan sword can fight against Chiyu. Therefore, you can never let go of the opportunity to completely leave that era. You must maintain your resistance against Chiyu. Only when he's completely destroyed and history returns to its original state can you do so. After listening to Zagru's words, Chiyu couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Zagru was right. However, destroying Chiyu is easier said than done. Perhaps, with the power of the Bull Demon King, Chiyu could indeed be destroyed. However, only God knew what would happen after the Bull Demon King obtained Panga's axe. One must know that his tyrannical strength was not something that Chiyu could compare with. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Chiyu would never help the Bull Demon King obtain Panga's axe. I can only do my best in this matter. I hope that I can improve my strength to a sufficient level as soon as possible to fight against Chiyu. Great Master, please continue to talk about the 10 great artifacts. Zagru glanced at Chiyu with some worry. He said, "Your judgment just now is correct. The Xianyuan sword was formed by the great god Zhu Rong's combination of the energy of the sun, the moon, and the stars, in addition to all kinds of energy that were already available on Earth at that time. And the Panga's axe was created by the great god Gong Gong. Although their relationship had been reconciled, it was inevitable that they still had the intention to win. However, it was inevitable that they would still have the intention to win. Hence, when they were creating the god tools, they all targeted each other. The 6 artifacts created by the great god Zhu Rong were not all created by him. One of them was naturally condensed energy between heaven and earth, and the other was created by goddess Nuwa. And the artifact that was naturally condensed was the Kunlun mirrors obtained by the Snow Girl. With it, it could travel through time and space. And the artifact created by goddess Nuwa was naturally the Nuwa stone that had the ability to bring the dead back to life. Because of the appearance of these 2 artifacts, the balance of power between the great god Gong Gong and the great god Zhu Rong was broken. Fortunately, the power of these 2 artifacts was far less powerful than the artifacts created by the 2 great gods, so there were no real problems. And these 2 artifacts were naturally ranked at the bottom of the 10 great artifacts. As for the other 8 divine artifacts, the Xianyuan sword, the Eastern Emperor Bell, the Kongtong seal, and the Devil Refining Gourd were created by the great god Zhu Rong, while the other 4 were created by the great god Gong Gong. Although the Eastern Emperor Bell was ranked first, in fact, its real power was not very strong. It was only ranked first because it could connect to all the sealed planes from Earth. And the Demon Refining Gourd and the Fushi Zither, created by the great god Gong Gong, were opposite each other. These 2 artifacts directly destroyed the enemy with energy fluctuations. The difference was that one absorbed the enemy, while the other used the sound of the zither to shock the enemy. But the effect was similar, and they were both the most powerful auxiliary weapons. And among the other 3 artifacts created by them, the Shinnon Cauldron and the Eastern Emperor Bell had something in common. They were not mainly used in battle, so they could be ignored. And the artifacts that were really used in battle on the great god Gong Gong side, it was ranked 2nd, the Xianyuan sword, and ranked 8th, the Kongtong seal. And on the great god Gong Gong side, it was ranked 3rd, the Pangu axe, and ranked 5th, the Haotian pagoda. The 4 artifacts are opposite each other, and their power is basically balanced. An idea flashed in Chiyu's mind, and he said, "Great Master, after saying so much, are you trying to tell me that when the Xianyuan sword and the Kongtong seal are used together, they can directly produce a special effect?" Zagru smiled and said, "Yes, that's right. After the 2 great gods created the 4 main offensive artifacts, they were not used by themselves. It was not for their own use, because they did not need to rely on any magic treasures at all. So they gave the 4 artifacts to Nuwa and Pangu respectively. Panga mastered the Pangu axe and the Haotian pagoda, and Lady Nuwa naturally mastered the Xianyuan sword and the Kongtong seal. In addition to the Nuwa stone, which she created herself, her overall power had already surpassed Pangu. In the end, it was precisely because of this reason that the 10 great artifacts were all left in the human world. Pangu and Nuwa also followed the 2 great gods, Zhu Rong and Gong Gong, to break through the void and travel to the distant universe. The 10 great artifacts are left in our world, and their status is equivalent to the Western gods. They can give the human beings of the Yanhuang Republic energy, which is equivalent to the ability of the gods that the Western gods and devils have inherited from the human beings. Chi suddenly understood and said, "So that's how it is. No wonder there have been no gods in the East. It turns out that the former gods were too powerful and were completely destroyed by the two great gods Gong Gong and Zhu Rong. However, the myth that you told me is too shocking. If it were an ordinary person, I'm afraid it would be very difficult to believe." Zagru said, "This is the secret of heaven. If it weren't for the fact that you're the leader of this generation of Guardians of the East and will lead the Guardians of the East to fight against all possible crises, I wouldn't have brought you here and told you everything." She nodded and said, "Master, don't worry. I definitely won't let you down. Now, you should tell me how to get the Kontong seal." Zagru smiled and said, "As I said just now, it's very easy for you to get the Kontong seal. The Kontong seal and the Xianyuan sword used to belong to Lady Nuwa. Therefore, when the Kontong seal was set up, the seal stipulated that the person who obtains the Kontong seal must be a human. The second point is that you must have one of the other two artifacts of Lady Nuwa and awaken the seal spirit in the Kontong seal through the soul in the artifact. Only then can you get the approval of the Kontong seal. No one knows where the Stone of Nuwa is, but isn't the Xianyuan sword with you? As long as you use the power of the Xianyuan sword, you can naturally awaken the Kontong seal and get its approval." When Shiyu heard Zagru's words, he immediately understood and couldn't help but be overjoyed. If he could get another artifact, even if he faced the Bull Demon King, he would be able to protect himself. It seemed that the strength of the East was definitely not inferior to that of the West. Once he could fully exert the power of these two artifacts, why would he be afraid of the great devil god of hell? At that time, it would really be a case of killing gods and demons in the way. A faint light flickered, and the light in Chi Yu's eyes became more concentrated. However, he suddenly realized a problem, and the excitement in his heart suddenly disappeared. "Master, I'm afraid it's not possible." Zagru was stunned and said, "What do you mean? Don't you understand what I mean?" Chi Yu said with a wry smile, "No, of course I understand what you mean. It's just that when I fought against those guys from the Vatican in London, in order to save me, Senior Xianyuan's soul finally used his own power to activate the Lost Formation. The Lost Formation with the Xianyuan sword as the core is the God-killing formation, and it destroyed all the enemies who posed a threat to me at that time. However, because of this, Senior Xianyuan's soul directly fell into a deep sleep. He said that he would need 100 days to recover. Now, I'm afraid it's impossible to use him to get the approval of the Kontong seal." Chapter 252. Hearing Zagru's words, Chiyu nodded and said, "That's the only way now. As long as I can't obtain the recognition of the Kontong seal, let alone a month, I'm willing to wait for a year." Zagru pointed to the mountain below and smiled. "Then, I'll leave this place to you. I'm going out. After you obtain the Kontong seal, you'll naturally be able to leave this space with the help of the seal spirit. Take care of yourself. Before Senior Xianyuan Hun wakes up, don't be in a hurry to obtain the recognition of the Kontong seal. Understand?" Chiyu nodded. "Grandmaster, don't worry. I've also obtained 2 god artifacts in the past, so I have a certain level of understanding regarding the seals of god artifacts. As long as the opportunity hasn't arrived, it's impossible for humans to go against the seals left behind by the 2 great gods." Zagru looked at Chiyu approvingly, put his hands together, bowed slightly to Chiyu, and floated away, feeling the surging energy of the 5 elements in the West. Chiyu's heart was filled with excitement at this moment. Everything else was thrown to the back of his mind. Now he just wanted to properly cultivate in this space of the 5 elements mountains. That enormous 5-elemental aura was absolutely beneficial to his energy. He didn't want to waste any more time. Chiyu floated up and headed towards the 5 elements mountains below. The first mountain he chose was the Blue Mountain in the north. Although his water thundercloud force had already reached the 8 clouds realm, just like when it reached the 7 clouds realm, the thundercloud force's improvement wasn't stable enough, and the energy hadn't completely reached the 8 clouds level. Since he could only borrow the power of 2 mountains in the 5 elements mountains, he would first completely upgrade his water thundercloud force to the 8 clouds realm, then upgrade his fire thundercloud force. As for the 9 clouds, he didn't dare to think about it. After all, before all 4 types of thundercloud force were upgraded to the 8 clouds, there wouldn't be any more breakthroughs in the thundercloud force. Ever since he truly felt the power of the 4 types of thundercloud force, Chi would no longer rely on the energy of the origin of nature to enhance the 4 types of thundercloud force. In terms of strength, the improvement obtained in that way was far less effective than the improvement obtained by cultivating each type of thundercloud force one by one. Kieran had a total of 9 clouds. If he managed to reach 9 clouds, he would not have the true strength of 9 clouds. It would be difficult for him to improve in the future. Therefore, for the sake of long-term consideration, Chiyu had to choose a stupid method. He raised his thundercloud force one by one. Zaglu floated out of the 5-element mountain space and once again appeared in the dark Great Hall. He did not leave the Great Hall. Instead, he clasped his hands together in front of his chest and lowered his eyes. Facing the center of the Great Hall, he sighed and said, "You've heard everything that I said to Chiyu earlier. I'm sorry, benefactor. Although I'm also willing to cooperate with the East and the West, however, everything you did at that time hurt him too deeply. You should know Chiyu's character better than I do." In the darkness, a slender figure walked out. Under the dim candlelight in the hall, the slender figure looked so lonely. Her long purple hair was set off by a long white dress. She looked so alluring. However, the light in her eyes was filled with endless sorrow. Her body was even trembling slightly. The person who suddenly appeared in the hall was none other than Yamu, the one who tricked Chiyu in London and used Chiyu's origin of nature to completely inherit goddess Athena's divine power. Yamu's face was still wet with tears. She looked at Master Zagru and bowed. "Master, you've done your best. After all, I created it myself. It's all my fault. Unfortunately, it's already too late. If it wasn't for the fact that I have too many responsibilities on my shoulders, I really don't want to continue suffering like this." Zagru looked at Yamu. He could clearly feel Yamu's restless emotions. He sighed deeply and said, "I can understand your pain, but similarly, you should also understand Chiyu's pain. Don't think too much about it. Your mission now is the same as Chiyu's. Both are to improve your strength as much as possible in order to face the world's crisis that may appear at any time. You've completely inherited goddess Athena's divine power. It can be said that you're the real goddess Athena now. In a sense, it's not wrong for you to make an extreme choice in order to chase after greater power in a short period of time. After all, you have the support of millions of people in Greece. It's just that what you did was wrong. I think that if you directly told Chiyu that you hoped to get help from his source of nature, even if it would consume a lot of energy for Chiyu, given his character, he would probably agree. Unfortunately, you took advantage of his feelings. Chiyu is an orphan. Since he was a child, he has suffered the warmth and coldness of a human world. Therefore, he is very stubborn about his feelings. From love to hatred, this kind of hatred is the strongest. The Battle of Everest can no longer be changed, but the final outcome can only be decided by you and Chiyu. Listening to Zagru's words, Yamu did not speak for a long time. This time, she specially came to Tibet to look for Master Zagru. One reason was because Chiyu's aura had disappeared, and the other was to get Master Zagru's help. Through various investigations in Greece, Yamu knew that on Chiyu's side, the only one who could persuade Chiyu was Master Zagru in front of her. Therefore, she came. However, seeing that Chiyu hated her so deeply, what else could she do? Chiyu had said that hatred could not be resolved, and everything could only be solved by force. If it weren't for the fact that she had too many things on her shoulders, Yamu really wanted to die in the hands of Chiyu. Only then would her heart be free. When Chiyu was resurrected, the constellation guardian Mephistopheles had a premonition that Chiyu would be Yamu's only flaw, but even he did not know. For Yamu, this flaw was so huge. It was only later when Mephistopheles understood it was already too late. "Thank you, Master. I'm very grateful for your guidance. I'm leaving. The next time I come to Tibet will be on the 10th of January. I don't know if I'll see you again then." As she spoke, Yamu slowly turned around and walked out of the hall. Zagru looked at her silent back view and put his palms together. Ba. All causes and effects are determined by the heavens. Almsgiver, take care. 10th of January. For Chiyu, it was a special day. That was his birthday, the most painful day for him in the past 20 years. Hearing Zagru's words, Yamu could not help but tremble. She naturally knew that Chiyu was an orphan. For an orphan, birthday was undoubtedly the most painful day. She did not say anything more. Yamu seemed to have thought through some things and floated away. Looking at Yamu's back view as she left, Zagru's eyes were hazy as he shook his head. Is this an ill-fated relationship? Strength bestowed by the heavens is not necessarily a good thing. They should have been such a good couple, but it turned out to be like this. I hope that you can be a little more open-minded at the last moment. If he is responsible, I'm afraid that this world really does not have the power to resist the crisis. The Battle of Mount Everest will either be the end of everything, or it will be the beginning of everything. This will depend on how they choose. Time passed quickly. It had been more than a month since Chiyu left the era of the ancient beasts. Ryue stood on the hillside and looked at the vast plains in the distance. Ever since Chiyu left, the Zodiac army, under the leadership of the 12 Zodiac Guardians, had cooperated with the human army in more than 10 battles. Each time, they had achieved great results. They had forced the Jili People's army to retreat step by step. If it was not for the fact that the Jili People's army had extremely strong defenses, they would have lost more than a third of their army. Modern weapons should have been extremely powerful when used in ancient times. However, when the battle began, the people from the modern era understood that everything was not as simple as it seemed. The Jili people of the ancient beasts era had extremely strong defenses. Even armor-piercing bullets could only cause a certain amount of damage to them and could not kill them. It was no wonder that the Jili people, with only 50,000 soldiers, were able to annihilate an army of close to 1 million soldiers from the 4 main tribes. However, it was also thanks to the appearance of these modern weapons that the Jili people's casualties had increased significantly. The destructive power of firearms was still very strong. Just because one shot could not kill them did not mean that a group of shots could not kill them. During the continuous battles, the Jili people were unable to retaliate with the coordination of the Zodiac army and the firearms they had brought with them. They could only continuously retreat in defeat. Once Nali, the strongest among them, appeared, Ryue would naturally lead the Zodiac army to face him. As for Irual, the Black Tortoise and the Green Dragon, the 2 divine beasts, they became supervisors at Chiyu's request before he left. They would only intervene when the Zodiac army was in danger. After going through the baptism of more than 10 battles, although the speed of improvement couldn't be compared to the first month of training, every member of the Zodiac army had become much more tenacious than before. The real killing and army-level battles allowed them to obtain countless valuable experiences on the battlefield, as well as the baptism of their actual combat abilities. In the process of everyone's hard work, everyone's abilities had improved by leaps and bounds. This improvement was reflected in the cooperation of the entire Zodiac army. Each of the 12 small teams of the Zodiac army had formed an individual combat team with the team leader as the core. The 12 small teams were also a large combat team. On the battlefield, they were like a huge meat grinder. The solid defense of the ordinary Jili people, which even bullets could not penetrate, was nothing in front of the Zodiac army. The continuous battles had baptized these youths into obvious changes. Although there were only over 100 of them, in the eyes of both the Jili people and the 4 main tribes, they were a group of steel lions. They were a group of steel lions that could change the entire situation of the battle. Big Sister Ryue, are you thinking about him again? Mingming's voice rang out from behind Ryue. Ryue turned around and smiled at Mingming. Mingming had also undergone obvious changes after coming to the era of the ancient beasts. She was still lively and cheerful, but her immaturity had disappeared. She had now become an important commander on the battlefield. Her chicken Zodiac army was ranked among the top few in the entire Zodiac army. Are you making fun of me, Mingming? Don't you miss him? Ryue looked at Ming Ming and couldn't help but laugh. Ming Ming giggled and said, "Of course I miss him, but what's the use of missing him? That guy, he was so happy that he forgot about home and home. Why didn't he hurry back?" Ryue raised her hand and patted Ming Ming's head. She said dotingly, "You little girl, he must have been tied up by something. Otherwise, he would have returned long ago. It's useless for us to be anxious. Without the Kunlun mirrors, none of us can go back." Ming Ming said, "Big sister Ryue, there are less than 2 months until the 10th of January. Do you think we could defeat the Constellation Guardian led by Yemo?" Ryue shook her head and said, "I don't know, but one thing is for sure. Yemo must be very powerful. If she hadn't harmed Chiyu, perhaps our Eastern protectors and their Western protectors might have been able to cooperate." Ming Ming said hatefully, "What cooperation? Hasn't she harmed Chiyu enough? If it wasn't for Big Sister Wenting, Chiyu would have." As she said that, Ming Ming's eyes revealed a trace of sorrow. Wenting was already dead. She could completely understand Chiyu's feelings at that time. If she had the ability to save Chiyu, she would have done it without hesitation. Just as she was about to say something, she was suddenly shocked. She looked into the distance at the foot of the hill. She didn't know when, but a patch of green was slowly moving towards them. It was not the thriving green of nature, but a wretched green full of deathly stillness. In the flickering light, the wretched green figures seemed to have no end, especially the tall figures at the front, which made people feel even more terrified. The Jili tribe had come. Ming Ming was slightly shocked and said, "How could this be? Why would they suddenly attack us now? Haven't we been the ones with the advantage recently? Aren't they sending themselves to their deaths by attacking us from the front?" Ryue's eyes revealed a solemn glint. "No, they aren't sending themselves to their deaths. I'm afraid that Chiyu has returned after recovering from his injuries. If it wasn't for his command, these fellows wouldn't have dared to attack after suffering so many setbacks. The situation isn't looking good. We've used up most of the ammunition we brought in the previous battle. It seems like we can only rely on our strength for this battle. Ming Ming, quickly inform everyone to prepare for battle." Ming Ming acknowledged her words and drifted away. Ryue stared at the approaching Jili people army as she looked forward to his return. "Chiyu, if you were here, I wouldn't have to be so worried. When will you be back?" Ever since Chiyu became the king of the Zodiac, Ryue had given up her position as the #1 warrior of the Zodiac to him. She had already gotten used to the days when Chiyu was around. As long as Chiyu was around, the Zodiac warriors would have a backbone in any battle. However, Chiyu wasn't around. Ryue could only support the Zodiac warriors on her own. Seeing the Jili people launching an all-out attack, and Chiyu who might be hiding in the dark, Ryue felt a little embarrassed. Ryue was working hard to fight against the Jili people. What about Chiyu? He was currently in Tibet. In other words, he was still in the wonderful space of the Five Elements Mountain. Even Chiyu didn't know how much time had passed. Ever since he came here, other than a few times when he needed to cultivate the thundercloud force to stay awake, his spiritual power was almost always in a deep sleep. In this space, he didn't need to worry about any possible attacks at all. He could completely focus on cultivating. It was also under such circumstances that Chiyu fully experienced the benefits of the Five Elements Mountain. It was just as he expected. On the blue mountain peak in the north, there was an incomparably surging water attribute energy. It didn't take long. His water thundercloud force, which had reached the 8 clouds level, had completely stabilized after absorbing the huge amount of water attribute energy. After that, Chiyu moved to the red mountain peak in the south. Not long ago, with the abundant fire attribute energy here, he had reached the 8 clouds level after wholeheartedly cultivating 4 types of thundercloud force. 2 of them had reached the 8 clouds level, which meant that he had completed half of his 8 clouds cultivation. His strength had also greatly increased. At the same time, after completing the fire attribute cloud energy training, Chiyu discovered that when he arrived at the earth attribute yellow mountain peak in the center, the energy formed from the 5 elements would produce an extremely gentle aura. This aura was actually complementary to his own natural energy. Thus, in the following period of time, Chi-Yu's body began to emit a gentle aura. Chi-Yu absorbed this aura to strengthen his origin of nature. His body had also evolved again in the Five Elements Mountain. Although it wasn't as good as the rebirth of the origin of nature, his body was already very tough. It was extremely difficult to evolve again. In the process of constantly absorbing energy, his meridians were now able to withstand more and more energy fluctuations. Taking a deep breath, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of satisfaction. In this space, there was no real air. If ordinary people came to this space, they wouldn't even be able to survive at all. This was because this space was completely filled with the surging energy of the five elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The five energy elements reinforced and restrained each other. In different directions, the energy one breathed would also be different. It was a pity that only two of Chi-Yu's 4 types of thundercloud force were compatible with the five elements. Otherwise, he could even improve his strength in a short period of time. The origin of nature energy in his body had become more peaceful and compatible with his own energy. Chi-Yu stood up and glanced at the quiet surroundings. He suddenly felt a little anxious. He had been in Tibet for some time, and he didn't know what the situation was like during the era of the ancient beasts. Without Chi-Yu, it would not be a problem for the Zodiac army to help the human army resist the enemy's attack. However, once Chi-Yu recovered from his injuries and reappeared in the camp of the Jili people, everything would be hard to say. After all, he had the extremely terrifying Pangu axe in his hand. For Master Zagru's description of the Xianyuan sword, Pangu axe and Haotian pagoda should also be a pair. If only Pangu axe was present, it would be better. However, Chi-Yu was afraid that Chi-Yu would also discover the mystery of the 10 great artifacts. If he used Pangu axe to obtain Haotian pagoda, then the calamity of the ancient beasts would really arrive. At the thought of the uncertain factors over there, Chi-Yu was very anxious to leave this place. He wanted to return to the era of the ancient beasts as soon as possible. However, the Kongtong seal was too attractive to him. It was a divine artifact that could greatly improve his ability. Therefore, no matter how anxious he was, he could only wait for now. Just as Chi-Yu was preparing to continue his cultivation, a comfortable voice suddenly rang out in his heart. What a comfortable aura. This is the aura of an old friend. Chi-Yu, how did you get here? Upon hearing this voice, Chi-Yu could not help but be overjoyed. He hurriedly said, "Senior Xianyuan soul, you're awake? How is your energy recovery?" That's right. The voice that had suddenly appeared belonged to Xianyuan soul. Xianyuan soul smiled and said, "Don't worry. As long as the Xianyuan sword still exists, I will not disappear. However, I did not expect the god-killing formation to consume so much energy. If you had not come to this place, I'm afraid it would have taken a long time for me to wake up. Your energy seems to have become much stronger than before. Tell me, what happened while I was unconscious?" Chi-Yu agreed and hurriedly told him everything that had happened after he had returned from London. After listening to Chi-Yu's words, Xianyuan's soul could not help but angrily say, "These despicable people from the West really deserve to die. Damn it, the next time we go, we must get rid of them." However, I did not expect Chi-Yu to be able to obtain Panga's axe. Letting this guy obtain such a powerful divine weapon will indeed have a great impact on the era of the ancient beasts. The little monk was right on this point. I'm afraid only I can restrain Panga's axe. Chi-Yu, when we reach the era of the ancient beasts, we must try our best to attack Chi-Yu and get rid of him before he completely grasps the method of using Panga's axe. All right, let's not talk nonsense. Let's go. I'll bring you to meet my old friend. The five elements energy here can be said to be a great tonic for me. No wonder it feels so comfortable. With a flash of golden light, the Xianyuan sword appeared in front of Chi-Yu out of thin air. Compared to when he used the Xianyuan sword alone a few days ago, the light on the sword body had become much more lively. After all, only when the Xianyuan sword had a soul could it be considered a truly powerful divine weapon. The light on the Xianyuan sword shone brightly. Xianyuan's soul let out a long roar. Chi-Yu only felt that his whole body had become light. His body had been wrapped in the golden light released by the Xianyuan sword. Then, with a flash of golden light, the Xianyuan soul controlled the Xianyuan sword. Carrying Qi Yu's body, it directly went down the Five Elements Mountain. The direction in which he flew was under the yellow mountain in the center. Qi Yu had also used his own spiritual force to explore this space, but at that time, he did not find anything. But at this time, the sudden change surprised Qi Yu. When the golden light on the Xianyuan sword touched the yellow mountain, the entire Five Elements Mountain shook violently, and the five mountain peaks began to change to a certain extent. Five colored mountain rocks rolled down, and the huge energy began to tremble. In the flashing light, the yellow mountain that was originally in the center began to move, while the other four mountains began to converge towards one position, leaving an empty space in the original position of the four mountains, just enough for the yellow mountain to squeeze in, causing the five mountains to form a circle, forming the shape of a five-pointed star. Five colors flashed, and the energy of the five elements seemed to become more intense after the five mountains moved closer. A loud and clear dragon roar sounded from the center of the yellow mountain. Then, five rays of light rose into the sky, floating in the blink of an eye. Qi Yu clearly saw that they were five giant dragons, about 30 meters long. They were completely in the shape of the legendary giant dragons. They had no dragon wings, and their whole bodies were covered with thick scales. They had two horns on their heads, and their five giant claws were waving. As their bodies twisted, they constantly released a huge light. Just like the surrounding five mountains, as soon as they appeared, they arranged themselves into a pentagram, and their bodies stuck to each other, floating in the air. Xuanyuan's voice sounded in Qi Yu's mind. Do you see that? These are the five elements' undying divine dragons, and also the eternal guardians of the Kongtong seal. As long as the Kongtong seal is still there, they will never die. They are very powerful, and not something that those ancient giant beasts you know of can compare to. The strength of each undying divine dragon is not inferior to that little bird you recently took in. Moreover, with their undying attribute, they're even more powerful. In fact, even without Xuanyuan's words, Qi had already felt the strong energy fluctuations from the undying divine dragons. If such a tyrannical giant dragon could help him in all aspects, then his strength would increase even if he didn't want to. Under the effect of the five elements, if the five undying divine dragons joined forces to attack, the power would certainly be increased. As for how strong they would be, it was not something that Qi Yu could know for now. After the five elements, giant dragons appeared, as if they did not notice Xuanyuan's sword. They just hovered in the air in the shape of a pentagram. At this moment, a loud rumble came from the ground, and a huge stone pillar broke through the air at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had risen to the height of the five elements' giant dragons. The stone pillar was also pentagonal, and each side was different in color. When gathered together, it emitted a huge energy aura. Right in the middle of the stone pillar, Qi Yu saw a lustrous luster. It was a piece of milky white jade, and the luster on its surface looked so gentle. Faint light flickered, and the five elements giant dragons cheered at the same time. They stopped hovering and raised their heads in five different directions. Qi Yu fixed his eyes on it. The jade in the middle was pentagonal, and each side was inlaid with a gem. According to the five elements, the five gems' colors were exactly the same as the five mountains from before. The light from the gems was not strong, and on each of the five sides, there was a human figure carved. Although it looked a little blurry, it was vivid and lifelike, as if it had a life of its own. Faint light flickered, and the light in Qi Yu's eyes also became stronger. He knew that this must be the legendary Kongtong seal. The Kongtong seal ranked 8th among the 10 great divine weapons, and it could be paired with Xuanyuan's sword. Xuanyuan's sword let out a sharp whistle, and a sharp golden light pierced through the air, illuminating the entire space above the Five Elements Mountain. The light that was filled with benevolent aura shone on the jade, and suddenly the Kongtong seal changed. 5 immortal dragons with 5 different colors of light simultaneously merged into it, and the 5 gems on the 5 sides of the Kongtong seal immediately lit up. Then the 5-color dragons appeared, coiling around the statue, and turned into 5 small dragons. Xuanyuan's soul laughed loudly. "Old friend, you've slept long enough, it's time to wake up." A clear voice came from the Kongtong seal. "I was wondering who was so arrogant. So, it's this broken sword of yours. It looks like you're not doing very well, and your energy is not as abundant as before." Xuanyuan's soul said in a bad mood. "Nonsense. Do you think you can compare to before? Don't forget, we were in the hands of Goddess Nuwa at that time. Goddess Nuwa's energy was so strong, and now she's gone. Without her, do you think you can exert your full strength?" A light flashed, and a wisp of white smoke floated out of the Kongtong seal. The smoke circled around, and a middle-aged man who looked about 30 years old appeared out of thin air above the Kongtong seal. Faint light flickered, and he looked up at Xuanyuan's sword in the air and said, "Speak. Why did you wake me up?" Xuanyuan's soul said in a bad mood. "Why? Didn't I wake you up to ask you to help my current master? We've been separated for too long, and it's time for us to cooperate. You should know that Panga's axe has also appeared. Come, Chiyu, let me introduce you. This is the seal spirit of the Kongtong seal." Chapter 253. Yinling sized up Chiyu and said indifferently, "Xianyuan, what does Panga's emergence have to do with me? That's your business. As long as the clear sky pagoda doesn't appear, I won't bother to leave this place. Don't you know how comfortable it is to rest in your own space?" Xianyuan Hun snorted and said, "Cut it out. Comfortable my ass. Only you can sleep here. If you don't come with me, I'll tear apart this space of yours. Let's see how you can sleep then." Yinling said angrily, "Are you forcing me?" Xianyuan said proudly, "That's right. I am forcing you. So what? Fight me then. Too bad you don't have that ability." "You." Yinling looked angrily at the giant Xianyuan sword in the air. He raised his right hand and waved it at Chiyu and said, "Human, leave this place first. It seems that if I don't teach this arrogant guy a lesson, he won't know what the 5 elements of heaven and earth are." In this space of 5 elements, the Kongtong seal was the absolute ruler. Chiyu felt his vision blur. When the surrounding scenery became clear again, he found himself back in the hall. He wasn't worried about the Xianyuan sword. After all, the Xianyuan sword was much higher than the Kongtong seal. Moreover, he'd clearly seen a trace of a faint smile appear on the face of the Kongtong seal spirit at the instant before he left. He didn't have to wait for long. When Chiyu felt a strong energy fluctuation, he was sucked back into the space of 5 elements. What shocked Chiyu was that the peaks of the 5 elements were gone. The 5 elemental mountains had already lost their peaks, and Yinling was in a very sorry state. 5 undying divine dragons hovered around his body. His originally righteous clothes had become very messy. The light of the Kongtong seal on top of the pentagonal stone pillar had dimmed a lot. Xuanyuan's soul had already revealed his true form. He held the Xianyuan sword in his hand and looked at Yinling. He didn't look much better than Yinling. His breath was a little messy, and the light on the Xianyuan sword wasn't as bright as before. Yinling said dejectedly, "I didn't expect this. I still can't beat you in my territory. You're still the same old bastard. I don't care, you have to compensate me for my 5 elements mountain. What am I supposed to do if you split them all?" Xuanyuan's soul chuckled and said, "That's your business. What does it have to do with me? However, if you are willing to come with us for the sake of a master after our mission is over, I can consider repairing these broken mountains for you. Pasan, if you didn't rely on your own sharpness, you definitely wouldn't be able to defeat me in my 5 elements mountain space. Don't forget, the 5 elemental energies here are completely under his control," Yinling said with dissatisfaction. Xianyuan Hun said impatiently, all right, be quick. Are you coming with us or not? If you don't want to, then forget it. Don't waste our precious time." Yinling glanced at Chiyu, who had been sucked back into the space, and said, "Is it him? Xianyuan, you should know my temper. What makes him qualified to be my master?" Xianyuan Hun shrugged indifferently and said, "Do whatever you want." Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Chiyu, he wants you to pass his test before he approves of you. Let him see how strong humans have become. Want to fight? Chiyu had never been afraid of anyone, not even Chiyu. When he obtained the Xianyuan sword, he fought with Emperor Huang, and when he obtained the Kunlun mirrors, he made a bet with the immortal in the mirror. Now that he had encountered the Kongtong seal Ling, he would fight her if she wanted to. He would never back down. Chiyu looked at Ling and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "How do you want to test me? Please tell me, senior." Ling's expression became a little better when she saw Chiyu's respectful expression. She said, "As long as you can endure the undying divine dragon's attack for 2 hours, I will acknowledge your strength, provided that you don't have his help." As she spoke, Ling pointed at Xianyuan Hun next to her. Fighting the 5 elements undying divine dragons for 2 hours? That's 2 of them disappearing. That doesn't seem possible. Since the undying divine dragons are immortal, I can't destroy them. At the same time, I can't bear to destroy them. If what Xianyuan Hun said was true, that every undying divine dragon's strength was about the same as Little Ping's, then it wouldn't be easy for me to deal with them. Perhaps only the Bull Demon King's strength could easily defeat them when they were besieged. As soon as Chiyu thought of the Bull Demon King, the latter's voice rang out in his mind. "How about it? Do you want to make your second request?" "Sigh, I'm going to be jealous. After the Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors, there's actually another divine weapon that might belong to you. Why can't I encounter such a good thing?" "Don't worry. Although these 5 dragons are very powerful, as long as I make a move, passing them will be a piece of cake. At the same time, you won't be breaking the rules. After all, I'm your messenger now." The messenger is a part of Kirin's strength. It would be impossible for Chi-Yu not to be tempted. However, after weighing the pros and cons, he still rejected the Bull Demon King's suggestion. The 3 conditions that the Bull Demon King had agreed to were all life-saving straws. Unless his life was in danger, he wouldn't use it easily. Moreover, the Bull Demon King must have heard what Zagru had said in his body, so he naturally knew the secret of Panga's axe. If he got his hands on Panga's axe, then there would be too many variables. There's no need for that. Since I'm going to accept the Kongtong Seal's test, I'll definitely rely on my own strength. Go to sleep, old bull. I'll wake you up when I need your help." After rejecting the Bull Demon King, Chiyu nodded at Ling and said in a deep voice, "Senior, let's start now." Regardless of whether he succeeded or failed, he didn't want to waste any more time. Ling looked at Chiyu's deep voice with a hint of approval in his eyes. He didn't give any orders, but the 5 undying divine dragons that were originally circling around his body stretched out their huge bodies and pounced in Chiyu's direction. The bodies of the 5 dragons looked very transparent, as if they were carved from glass. However, Chiyu knew that the main reason they were called immortal was that their bodies were made up of energy. Physical damage had no effect on them at all. Since these undying divine dragons were undying, it was impossible for him to defeat them without the Xianyuan sword. Since that was the case, Chiyu gave up on attacking. With a flash, Chiyu instantly completed the Kirin transformation. Under the effect of the energy enhancement, Chiyu's body suddenly became agile. He stepped on the Kirin transformation in the air and quickly slipped through the gaps of the 5 giant dragons' bodies before they could pounce on him. From the start of the battle with the 5 elements undying divine dragons, Chiyu had thought of the silver dragon canopy. The undying divine dragon was a body of energy. In that case, the energy immunity silver dragon barrier would deal the most direct damage to them, and it could even make them lose the ability to fight. However, this idea only flashed across Chiyu's mind, but he did not put it into action. It was not that he did not want to use it, but the bodies of the 5 elements undying divine dragons were too big. The silver dragon barrier was an energy immunity domain because of its absolute nature. It had a very big limitation, and that was the area that the domain could cover. The silver dragon barrier could not be like the Art of Thousand Changes, which could cover as much as the energy allowed. Instead, it could only maintain an area of no more than 20 square meters. Given that the 5 undying divine dragons were more than 30 meters long, it was impossible for the silver dragon barrier to cover them. Therefore, Chiyu immediately gave up on the idea of destroying the energy of the other undying divine dragons. Seeing that the 5 giant dragons were pouncing on him again, almost sealing off the entire space, Chiyu did not panic. He had fought many experts and had rich combat experience. He knew that if he retreated now, he would not be able to hold on for another 2 hours. Now was not the time to save energy. Even if he could not complete the Kongtong Seals test, he must not leave a bad impression on the other party. A huge longsword appeared out of thin air in Chiyu's right hand. Kirin's illusory form was almost the same size as the Xinyuan sword. After all, Chiyu was most used to using heavy swords. Floating up, Kirin condensed the thundercloud force with all its might. Holding the sword with both hands, he shouted and unleashed a slash with Kirin's origin power. A silvery white light shot out from the sword, sweeping toward the undying divine dragons. Chiyu was very smart. He did not expand his attack to attack all 5 undying divine dragons at the same time. Instead, he limited the silver light slash to a certain range, using his tyrannical energy control ability to compress the attack as much as possible. A silver light about 1 meter wide reached the charging undying divine dragon in the blink of an eye. A faint light flickered. Chiyu's movements were very fast and very concise. After attacking with the sword, he did not even look at the effect of his attack and directly leaped back, quickly putting some distance between him and the undying divine dragon. At this time, golden wings appeared on his back. With the golden-winged eagle's ability to soar up 90,000 miles, his linear speed had greatly increased. Even if he was facing the undying divine dragon, it would not be much different. Amidst a loud rumble, the all-out attack, full of compressed energy, collided with the undying divine dragon in the air, triggering a large amount of energy fluctuations. The yellow figure trembled in the air, but in the end, it still could not catch up with Chiyu's attack. Chiyu sensed through his chi activity that although the undying divine dragon seemed to be formed from energy, its body was no different from a real body. Under the collision of energy, it actually used its dragon claws to forcefully collide with his own energy. The sharpness of the illusory Qilin and Chiyu's tyrannical attack had caused a certain amount of damage to the earth attribute undying divine dragon, leaving a deep scar on its body. The energy within its body had also been twisted into a mess, and it needed to adjust before it could launch another attack. Seeing Chiyu's tyrannical attack, Yinling's expression changed slightly. Chiyu's tyrannical strength had left a deep impression on him. At this time, the other 4 undying divine dragons had also closed in on Chiyu. At the same time, they opened their huge mouths and spouted a huge amount of energy of their own attribute at Chiyu. The speed of the energy impact was always faster than flying. In the blink of an eye, it had already covered Chiyu's body. With Kirin's illusion in hand, Chiyu saw that he had no chance to dodge. He held the sword in front of his chest with both hands, and a dark red light instantly rose from his back. In a flash, the light had completely enveloped the 4 dragons. Boom! Although Chiyu had used the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique in time, he still suffered a huge energy impact the moment the domain was completed. Fortunately, he was very familiar with the energy usage method of the Azura Blade that he had learned in the past. At the same time, when the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique was formed, he instantly dispersed a part of the energy, which allowed him to use the sharpness of Kirin's illusion to break the energy attacking him. The sound of metal cutting and the impact of the 4 different attributes of energy in the energy circulation in his body made Chiyu almost spurt out blood. The reason why Chiyu did this was very obvious. Of course, he knew that it was impossible for him to destroy the earth attribute undying divine dragon with a full blow. The result he wanted was to slow down the speed of the divine dragon's attack and temporarily separate it from the other 4 undying divine dragons. Judging from the 5 elemental attributes, the earth attribute undying divine dragon was clearly the leader of the 5 undying divine dragons. Moreover, when the 5 elements were gathered, under the effect of the principle of mutual generation, their attacks were bound to be more powerful. At this time, the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon lagged behind a little, and then used the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique to include the other 4 Undying Divine Dragons into his domain. This immediately broke the 5 elemental formation that they had formed, so that when they attacked, they would not be able to achieve the previous joint effect. Although this would allow the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragons to attack his domain from the outside, it was obviously the best way to separate them now. As expected, when the 4 Undying Divine Dragons entered Chi-Yu's domain, they immediately became a little flustered. When Chi-Yu's figure automatically turned invisible, they immediately began to attack indiscriminately. Using the Sumru Mustard Seed ability of the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique, Chi-Yu successfully separated the 4 Undying Divine Dragons once again, so that their attack power could only be reflected individually. The Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon outside had already recovered by this time. Since it was immortal, although Chi-Yu had injured it quite severely, it had only affected its energy to a certain extent. It let out a deafening dragon roar and immediately pounced toward the huge dark red ball of light in front of it. These Undying Divine Dragons only had some simple, low-level intelligence and did not have very strong thinking abilities. The seal spirit of the Kongtong seal was the true core of this divine weapon. Chi-Yu, who was inside the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique, smiled. The moment he saw the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon pouncing toward his domain, his mental strength suddenly went berserk and abruptly removed the effect of the Sumru Mustard Seed ability, causing the 4 Undying Divine Dragons to gather together again. However, he also used the spatial transfer ability in his domain to forcibly adjust the 4 Undying Divine Dragons to face the same direction. The 4 Undying Divine Dragons attacked at the same time, and the 4 types of energy, water, fire, metal, and wood, immediately surged in one direction. At this moment, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique disappeared, and the dark red color disappeared along with it. What appeared in front of the 4 Undying Divine Dragons was a large area of earthy yellow energy attack. Chi-Yu floated backwards, quickly adjusting the energy he had expended. When facing multiple enemies, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique could often be used to its greatest effect. It was just like when he first encountered the army of beasts led by the Ox Demon King. At that time, Chi was far less powerful than he was now, but he was still able to rely on his special control of the domain to concentrate the attacks of the 3 Beast Kings on the Ox Demon King and almost cause him great harm. Although the energy of the 4 Undying Divine Dragons was not weak, there was still a gap between them and the 3 Beast Kings. Therefore, it was not difficult to simply change the direction of their energy. 4 against 1. Without any suspense, the huge body of the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon was immediately engulfed by the energy of its companions. The earthy yellow light completely disappeared in midair. Just as the 4 Undying Divine Dragons were in a daze after destroying their companions, the dark red energy once again enveloped their bodies under Chi-Yu's ingenious control. This time, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique enveloped the 3 Undying Divine Dragons, leaving only the fire attribute Undying Divine Dragon outside. As his strength increased, Chi-Yu's control of this magical domain became more and more proficient. Unless it was a super powerhouse like the Bull Demon King, it would not be easy to deal with his domain. The fire attribute Undying Divine Dragon was stunned for a moment. He, who only had a low level of intelligence, clearly did not know why the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon was destroyed. When he saw the dark red light directly enveloping his 3 companions, he did not hesitate to launch an attack. At this time, using the same method, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique disappeared again. 3 against 1. It was still a battle without any suspense. The fire attribute Undying Divine Dragon also disappeared into thin air after the Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon. Chi-Yu's heart was filled with excitement. Although he had deliberately planned this battle, he did not expect the results to be so good. Moreover, the use of the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique did not consume too much of his energy. The thundercloud force was enhanced. This allowed him to control the entire domain as if it was his own arm, and he could control it as he pleased. Seeing that there were only 3 undying divine dragons left in front of him, Chi was about to repeat the same trick. He was surprised to see that a yellow light had already lit up behind Ling, and at this moment, the Kongtong seal flashed with a yellow light. The Earth attribute Undying Divine Dragon was already in the process of recovering, and it would not be long before it could attack him again. Seeing this scene, Chi was not alarmed, but rather delighted. He knew that although the 5 guardian divine dragons were known to be undying, it would ultimately take time for them to recover from the destruction of their energy. He couldn't attack immediately after his body was destroyed. As long as that was the case, then, as long as this was the case, today's problem would be easily solved. As long as he could destroy these 5 undying divine dragons one by one, when they recovered, they would only be able to recover one at a time. Given his strength, he would not be able to defeat all 5 of them. But if there was only one, it would be much easier. As he pondered, Chiyu's hands did not stop moving. The infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique appeared again and enveloped 2 undying divine dragons at almost the same time. 2 against 1. The same result allowed him to destroy another opponent. At this time, Yinling's expression had completely changed. Whatever chi you could think of, the soul of the divine weapon could also think of. He knew that there was no point in continuing the battle at this point. He directly withdrew the remaining 2 undying divine dragons and said in a deep voice, "That's enough." Kiran's illusion disappeared, and Chiyu smiled and nodded. "Senior, do I pass the test?" Yinling nodded and said, "Yes, you pass. However, I really want to know what kind of domain ability you used just now. Even with my mental strength, I couldn't break into it to control the undying divine dragons. This is the first time I've seen such a domain." Chiyu said, "This domain is called the Infinite Changes of 4 Stars Boundary Technique, and it's an ability bestowed upon me by a senior. Simply put, its characteristics are very similar to the Kunlun Divine Illusion of Kunlun Mirrors, and it relies on illusions and spatial changes within the domain to achieve its goals. At the same time, it can also enhance or weaken energy to a certain extent." Yinling suddenly understood and said, "I see. You took advantage of the undying divine dragon's low intelligence to break their joint attack. However, your action at the beginning was the most crucial. You forcibly separated the 5 undying divine dragons before they completed the 5 elements harmony. Otherwise, you might not have been able to use this domain." Chiyu scratched his head and said, "I was just lucky." Yinling snorted and said, "If there's really so much luck in the world, why do we need divine weapons? It's not luck, but the effect of practical experience." Xianyuan was in a good mood. He laughed and said, "What do you think? I didn't follow the wrong person, did I? Although Chi-Yu's current strength isn't enough to display our true power, even I can't help but be shocked by the speed of his growth. He has great potential for development. You should also feel the natural aura on his body, which has a strong nourishing effect on your 5 elements energy. The test is over, so you shouldn't hesitate anymore." Yinling smiled and said, In fact, do you think I have any other choice after meeting you? If I don't agree, you'll tear me apart if you don't agree. I didn't expect that we could join forces again after so many years. But I don't know what enemy we're going to face this time." Xianyuan floated to Yinling's side. The two stretched out their right hands at the same time and shook hands in the air. Xuanyuan's soul said emotionally, "Left Kong Tong, right Xianyuan, heaven and earth shocking sword and seal harmony. Old friend, we're finally together again." Yinling said snappily, "Don't flatter me. There's no other way to be with you. I can't continue the peace I've enjoyed for so many years." The process of the master recognition was very simple. After checking Chi-Yu's body, the Kongtong seal directly fused with his Kirin pearl, turning the pearl-like pearl Kirin pearl into a jade-like shape. The fusion. Not only did it make the Kirin pearl bigger, but it also made it easier to control everything inside the Kirin pearl. There was no Kirin Pearl, but there was the Kong Tong seal, which had the ability of the Kirin Pearl. Chiyu's wait for more than a month was not in vain. Under the guidance of the Kong Tong seal, he finally left the space of the Five Elements Mountain and came to the main hall of the Saint Buddha Temple. When Chiyu appeared in the main hall, Zagru was already waiting for him. He glanced at the Kirin Pearl hanging on Chiyu's neck, which had turned into a pentagonal jade pendant. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Congratulations. Now you really have the ability to lead the East to face all enemies." Chiyu bowed respectfully to Zagru. He said, "This is all thanks to Master's guidance. I must leave immediately. My companions are still waiting for me in the ancient beast period. I must hurry back to meet them." Zagru nodded and said, "You will come back to Tibet soon. Chiyu, I won't persuade you anymore. I just hope that you can think about who the enemy you will face in the near future is. For the future of more people, you have to be clear about this. Do you understand?" Chiyu was silent for a moment. He looked at Zagru's clear eyes and sighed. "Master, I understand what you mean. I can only say that I will do my best. However, I can't guarantee anything. I'm leaving. Take care, Master." As the door opened, Chiyu turned into a wisp of smoke and left. With his exquisite control of energy, he could completely control the energy around his body. After leaving the Saint Buddha Temple, Chiyu was in a very good mood. Although Zagru's last words made him ponder, some things could no longer be changed. He simply didn't think too much about it. He quickly left the Saint Buddha Temple and headed for the capital. After his water and fire thundercloud force were completely upgraded to the Eight Clouds realm, Chiyu's flying speed was almost the same as Little Peng. Because of his excitement, he didn't even summon Little Peng this time. Instead, he relied on his own power to fly towards the capital. The Five Elements mountain space could be said to have benefited Chiyu a lot. Not only did he wait for Xuanyuan's soul to wake up, but he also upgraded 2 of his 4 thundercloud force to the Eight Clouds realm. He also obtained the Kong Tong seal, one of the top 10 artifacts. With the Kong Tong seal, Chiyu believed that even if Bull Demon King had the ability to break the life and death domain, he would have to think twice if he wanted to fight against him. The power of 2 artifacts was much stronger than a single artifact. Seeing that the capital was getting closer and closer, Chiyu woke up from the excitement of the energy upgrade. He was about to reach home. Then, should he go and see his parents? After knowing his identity, how would they face him? Or in other words, how should he face them? After all, they were his parents. It was impossible to escape, and Chiyu didn't want to escape. Seeing that the capital was right in front of him, he simply let go of his body and mind and let nature take its course. Facing it calmly might be the best way for now. Quietly landing in the Dragonfield courtyard, Chiyu immediately felt Snow Girl's aura. He didn't hide his own aura either. Before he walked towards the villa, a cyan figure had already flown out and fell into his arms. "Chiyu, you're back." Snow Girl excitedly hugged his neck and jumped. Looking at her somewhat resentful gaze, Chiyu couldn't help but smile and said, "Silly girl, I'm back now, aren't I?" Snow Girl unhappily snorted and said, "You said you'd come back as soon as possible, but you've been gone for dozens of days." This time, she finally got some alone time with Chiyu, but Chiyu had left for so long. Seeing that they were about to return to the era of the ancient beasts, it was normal for her to be unhappy. Chiyu said, Let's go back first." As he said that, he took Snow Girl's little hand and went directly back to the room. Snow Girl poured a glass of water for Chiyu and asked, "Why were you gone for so long? I was worried to death. You don't know, Uncle and Annie would call almost every morning and evening to ask about you. In the end, I didn't have the heart to tell them that you haven't returned." Hearing Snow Girl mention his parents, Chiyu's eyes showed a trace of complicated feelings. "Are they okay?" The Snow Lady shook her head and said, "Even though I haven't seen them recently, I'm sure they're not in a good state, considering how anxious they are because of you. Chiyu, no matter what, before we leave, you must see them one last time. Don't tell me you still blame them for being wary of you that day." Chiyu shook his head, smiled slightly, and said, "How can that be? After all, they are my parents. How can I really blame them? It's just that I was a little depressed at that time. It wasn't easy for me to find my parents, but I couldn't recognize them. That feeling was very difficult for me to accept. But this time I went to Tibet, I thought it through. It could be seen that because of my disappearance, they also suffered a lot. Wealth can't bring spiritual sustenance. So we are all victims. After all, they are my biological parents. Don't worry, before I leave, I will definitely see them. Snow Girl breathed a sigh of relief and said, I'm relieved that you can think like this. Well, tell me what you've been doing in Tibet these days. Looking at Snow Girl's curious look, Chiyu couldn't help but pinch her cute little nose and said with a smile, This time I went to Tibet, I gained a lot. I understood some things that I couldn't figure out before, and at the same time, my strength has improved to a certain extent. Now, even if I face Chiyu again, I'm confident that I won't lose. At that moment, he told Snow Girl what had happened to him in Tibet, hiding the matter about the Eastern mythology. After all, it was a leak of heavenly secrets. The fewer people who knew, the better. Moreover, it was meaningless for Snow Girl to know. Chapter 254. Chiyu looked at the bright sky outside and said, Snow Girl, I'm a little worried about everyone. Let's go back tonight. I'm afraid that Chiyu has already healed his injuries. After all, he has Panga's axe, and we can't treat him with common sense. There was a trace of disappointment in Snow Girl's eyes, but she still nodded and said, Okay, we'll leave whenever you say so. However, there are some things I need to tell you now. Our Kirin group is developing faster than we thought. General G called about half a month ago and said that the national leaders have fully recognized our company's fruit and praised it. However, in order to ensure that the company's fruit supply to the national leaders is not leaked, everything has to be done in secret. And the country will not treat us badly. Although they will not pay us to buy the fruit, they will specially adjust our company's tax to half of the previous one. At the same time, under the influence of the country, our products have been widely promoted. The national leaders are very appreciative of you. The biggest help for us is to broadcast our company's promotional video on national television during prime time. It will be broadcast once a week for a year. Such a publicity effect is not a problem of a little money. With the support of the country, coupled with the promotion of the customers who bought our products in the early stage, our first batch of products has been sold, and the second batch is also in the process of preparing to go on the market. The initial investment has been fully recovered. Now, Sister Guan won't say that your price is too high. She even wants to reduce the price. Although she works hard every day, she is very happy when she sees the financial statements. Speaking of this, Snow Girl couldn't help but laugh. Hearing that the company was on the right track, Chiyu couldn't help but feel relieved. He really didn't have time to take care of the company's affairs. It was already very good to be able to have such results. After laughing, Snow Girl continued. Also, because the effect of our company's products is very obvious, it has attracted the attention of some foreign counterparts. Now, there are 7 countries' counterparts who have asked us for the agency rights of our products. How do you think we should deal with this matter? Chiyu thought about it and said, This is simple. Everything will be done according to the normal procedures. We don't need agents. Everything will be done through direct sales. We must control our own products. Because our natural fruits are unique, we are not afraid of competition at all. Even if their competitors had the cultivation method, they wouldn't be able to cultivate the same fruit without the environment of the ancient beasts. Don't worry now. Call Sister Moon Guan later. After we leave, she will be in charge of all the company's affairs. Don't worry about the exit for now. Let's talk about it after we come back. Let her establish a foothold in the country first and increase the promotion of our company's products. When we come back, I believe that we have accumulated a certain amount of capital. That will be the best time for us to enter the international market. After all, we are a newly developed company. I still need a lot of time to integrate the immature aspects. Snow Girl nodded and said, Sister Moongate and I also think so after discussing it. Now is not the time to rush development. They had to stabilize the situation first. Moreover, our company's products also need to better establish a solid customer base. Only after we have a stable income can we plan to develop our products. However, I don't know why, but recently, the foreign media seems to be paying attention to our small company. I heard from Sister Moongate that there are a lot of reports about us abroad. Should we investigate this matter? Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "Our energy is limited after all. We're leaving soon. Sister Moon Gate can't handle it alone. Let's put it aside first. When we return from the ancient beast period, we will deal with these matters. Oh, by the way, tell Sister Moon Gate that if the conditions are right, we will buy 2 more large cold storages. We can't always go to the ancient beast period. This time, we have to bring back as many fruits as possible," Snow Girl said with some worry. "But in that case, will the time affect the quality of the fruits?" Chi-Yu smiled slightly, shook his head, and said, "How can that be? Don't forget, I am the source of nature. And with Sister Plant Soul's understanding of plants, as long as a certain amount of natural energy is steadily injected into the warehouse, there will be no problem." Snow Girl said, "So that's how it is. Then let's do it." Chi-Yu's eyes showed deep emotions and said, "We are leaving tonight. Accompany me to meet them. I think they must have left their phone number for you." Snow Girl naturally knew who Chi-Yu was talking about. She said, "Then should I call them now?" Chi-Yu took out his phone and said, "I will call them myself. Tell me their number." After all, they were his biological parents. It was better to solve these problems by himself. He dialed Chi Tianlei's phone number according to the Snow Girl told him. Hearing that the call had been connected, it was impossible for Chi-Yu not to be nervous. "This is Chi Tianlei. Who is it?" Chi Tianlei's voice was still so majestic. It was full of magnetism, and even Chi-Yu felt very comfortable listening to it. The phone number that Chi Tianlei had left for the Snow Lady was a private number that wasn't open to the public. His secretary was usually the one who answered the phone for business purposes. "It's me." Chi-Yu was silent for a while before answering. Perhaps because of his emotions, his voice was a little low. Chi Tianlei was stunned at first, and then his voice changed. It was no longer calm, but full of excitement. "Chi-Yu, is that you? Where are you now?" Hearing his father's voice and his excited and intimate emotions, Chi-Yu's nervous mood slightly relaxed. He said, "I am at the Dragon Field courtyard." Before Chi-Yu could continue, Chi Tianlei quickly interrupted, "You are finally back. Okay, wait for us there. We will go immediately." After saying this, he immediately hung up. Chi-Yu looked at the phone in his hand in a daze. Chi Tianlei's eagerness made him feel a strong sense of kinship. They are coming, they are coming. Thinking that he was about to meet his parents, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He quickly changed into a set of clean clothes and deliberately shaved to make himself look more refreshed. It was as if he was preparing for a blind date, nervous with a bit of excitement. Snow Girl looked at Chi-Yu with a smile. She hadn't seen Chi-Yu so excited for a long time. Being able to reunite with her biological parents, Snow Girl's joy was no less than Chi-Yu's. What she wanted most was for Chi-Yu to be happy. Perhaps this was the emotion that would appear after loving someone. After Chi-Yu fixed himself up, he immediately brought Snow Girl to the hall. At first, he was able to stroll calmly in the hall, but after walking 2 laps, he couldn't help but think in his heart. When Chi Tianlei and his wife arrive, what should I say first? Should I directly go up to them and reunite with them? Or should I first sound them out and see how they are prepared to treat me? Along with the random thoughts in his mind, Chi-Yu's mood became more and more restless. Strolling from inside the villa to outside, he stood not far from the gate of the courtyard and anxiously waited. He even released his spiritual force, feeling the breath of life from the vehicles passing in every direction around the courtyard. In fact, doing this was completely futile. Chi Tianlei and his wife didn't have special abilities. Naturally, they wouldn't have energy sensing on their body. They were no different from ordinary people. Even if his spiritual force was strong, it was after all not his eyes. It was impossible for him to see them. Chi Tianlei and his wife's anxious mood was no less than Chi-Yu's. Without letting him wait for too long, the sound of brakes came from outside the courtyard gate, followed by a clear horn sound, waking Chi-Yu up from his restlessness. "Open the door," Chi-Yu called out to Snow Girl. Snow Girl was already prepared. The gate of the courtyard opened. A limited edition Rolls-Royce Phantom came in from the outside. The body of the car was extended, and the logo of the angel on the front of the car looked very eye-catching. However, Chi-Yu, who had always loved cars, had no time to pay attention to this. His eyes were like lightning, piercing straight into the car. As soon as the Rolls-Royce entered the gate, it stopped. Without waiting for the driver to get out of the car to open the rear door opened automatically. Chiyu, who was still thinking about how to face his parents, saw a petite figure jump out of the car. She really did jump out, and in the next moment, she was already in front of him. It was Ing Xiaodai. Just as Chiyu was about to say something, Ing Xiaodai hugged him with tears streaming down her face. My child, you're finally back. Do you know how hard it was for your mother to wait for you?" At this moment, Chiyu's mind was completely blank. All the words he had thought of before disappeared. His mother's words evoked the strongest emotion in his heart. He could not control his tears at all. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and threw himself into his mother's arms. Chiyu's voice was full of emotion, but he only managed to choke out one word, "Mom." The mother and son hugged each other and cried loudly. Chiyu seemed to want to express all the sorrow he had suffered as an orphan for 20 years, and Ing Xiaodai seemed to want to completely release the 20 years of longing she had for her son. The mother and son hugged each other and cried. Snow Girl, who was standing on the side, could not help but think of her parents and relatives when she saw this shocking scene. Tears flowed down her cheeks, and she could not help but sigh. Qi Tianlei's pace was no longer as steady as usual. He got out of the car only a little slower than Ing Xiaodai. He came to Chiyu and Ing Xiaodia's side, opened his wide arms, and hugged his wife and son. He murmured, choking with sobs, "Reunited. Our family is finally reunited." Uncle Zhou was standing at the door of the villa at this time, and Snow Girl was also standing beside him. However, at this moment, no one wanted to ruin this moment. Seeing the reunion of Chiyu and his family, they all silently wished them well in their hearts and were moved. After crying for a long time, Chiyu's emotions gradually stabilized. Because of the physical contact, he found that his mother's heart was a little overwhelmed because she was too excited. Only then did he wake up from his complicated emotions. A gentle and warm energy flowed into Ing Xiaodia's body through Chiyu's big hand. The comfortable feeling calmed her excited emotions, and the gentle energy slowly affected her body. Ing Xiaodia's crying gradually stopped. Raising his head, Chiyu wiped the tears off his face and looked at his mother, who was close at hand. For a moment, he could not speak at all. Ing Xiaodai held Chiyu's shoulders with both hands and said, "Child, get up quickly. The ground is cold." Chiyu stood up with the help of his mother. He was half a head taller than his father, Qi Tianlei. Looking at her son, who was not handsome but had a stalwart figure and exuded a noble temperament, the sadness in Ing Xiaodia's heart gradually disappeared and was replaced by pride and joy. "Child, you made me wait for so long. This month, I've been thinking about you every moment. Fortunately, you're finally back." Ing Xiaodai held Chiyu's hand tightly and did not let go. Looking at her son's white hair, she could not help but feel a surge of sadness in her heart again. Seeing that his wife was about to cry again, Qi Tianlei hurriedly said, "Let's go. Let's talk inside." As he spoke, he patted Chiyu's shoulder with a kind light in his eyes. Once upon a time, how he wished to have a warm family. But now all of this had come at the same time. The parents he longed for had finally come to his side. This feeling made Chiyu forget about his nervousness, and his emotions were in a state of extreme excitement. He could not calm down for a long time. The three of them came to the villa's hall and sat down. Qi Tianlei sat opposite Chiyu, while Ing Xiaodai insisted on sitting next to her son. She sat next to Chiyu and held his hand. Feeling the warm aura constantly released from his mother's body, Chiyu's eyes could not help but reveal a trace of childish emotions. Qi Tianlei sighed. 20 years, a whole 20 years, we finally found you. Chiyu, I know you may be blaming us. You didn't see us until today, 20 years later. You must have suffered a lot in these past 20 years. But can you understand the painstaking efforts of me and your mother? Back then, it wasn't that we abandoned you. It was our business competitor who stole my most beloved son in order to take revenge on us. Later, although I had my revenge, the last news I received was that the killer who stole you had vanished from the face of the earth. I used all the manpower and resources, but I never received any news about you. I don't know how many times your mother cried over losing you. Later, we had Ying. After having Ying, we decided not to have any more children because we already had a son. We always believed that you were still alive in this world. To be honest, I'm a very selfish person, and I'm not that passionate about charity work. However, since you disappeared, your mother and I put a lot of energy into charity work so that we can move the heavens and one day send you back to us. 20 years, a whole 20 years. Today, you finally appear in front of us. Child, can you forgive me and your mother? Seeing Chi Tianlei's eyes that had become red from excitement, Chi forcefully shook his head and choked with sobs. No, you don't need my forgiveness at all. Because after I found out about the situation back then, I didn't hate you at all. You also thought that I was suffering a lot from my disappearance. All of this can only be said to be the heavens playing tricks on our family. Dad. The last words suddenly made Chi Tianlei unable to control his emotions. For a moment, he couldn't help but burst into tears. What could be happier than having a son at an old age? Looking at his son, he was completely emotional and speechless. Ying Xiaodai leaned on Chi Yu's shoulder and cried again. Having obtained Chi Yu's approval, Chi Tianlei and Ying Xiaodai were now emotional. But inwardly, they were extremely excited. Originally, they thought that Chi Yu hadn't seen them for so long because he was still blaming them. But now, it seemed that everything was not a problem. His son had really returned to his side. The excitement of the family lasted for half an hour before they gradually calmed down. Ying Xiaodai gently wiped away the tears on her son's face. Because she was sitting next to Chi Yu, she couldn't help but smile as she felt her son's strong body. Child, you are much stronger than your father. It's been hard on you not being by our side for 20 years. Holding his mother's hand, Chi Yu gently shook his head and said, "The past is the past. Mom, you don't have to blame yourself anymore. Actually, I'm also at fault. If my emotions were more stable when I saw you before, maybe our family would have already acknowledged each other. Later, because there were some things that I had to deal with, I came back late. I made you worry." Chi Tianlei listened to Chi Yu and waved his hand. He let the security guards behind him leave the villa, and then said to Chi Yu, "I found out about your identity through some aspects, but I found out that your file is very mysterious." The last place it ended was in Qingbei University. Moreover, you dropped out halfway. There was no file at all after that. Even the Kirin group that you founded is pitiful in the file. As far as I know, you should be someone from an important department of the country. Naturally, there was nothing to hide from his parents. Chi Yu, Dad, I don't belong to any department of the country, but I have the approval of the country. How should I put it? My identity is quite special. From the country's point of view, I actually only have a Diamond Guardian medal and certain privileges. There's nothing else, and the country won't deliberately control what I do. Diamond Guardian medal? Hearing this name, Chi Tianlei and his wife were both shocked. Although they had a very close relationship with the police, they didn't receive such information. However, they had heard about the meaning of the Diamond Guardian medal. Only those who have made great contributions to the country are qualified to receive it. Moreover, the owner of the Diamond Guardian medal would only listen to the orders of the president. It could be said to be the highest standard of honor in the entire Yanhuang Republic, and their son actually had such an honor. It could be seen how extraordinary his identity was. Chi Yu looked at his parents' surprised expression and continued, "Simply put, we are a group. In terms of title, we are the Guardians of the East. Our mission is to protect the East. When there are some things that the country can't solve, we will step forward and be responsible for resolving these crises." Chi Tianlei thought about it and said, "So, you are an organization?" Chi Tianlei thought for a moment and said, "So, you're an organization?" Chi Tianlei thought about it and said, "So, you are an organization?" Chi Yu shook his head. "No, that's not it. Kirin Group is just something I came up with. I hope to make it my career. After all, it's not good for a man to not have his own career. Just like here. This is Ryue's villa. I can't not have my own house. And if I want to have everything, I must first have a capital." "Are you talking about Hai Ryue?" This girl was very capable. It was fortunate that her parents were so reassured to hand over the company to a girl in her 20s. If it weren't for the limitations of their company's own business projects, Longyou Group would have even greater development. When it came to economic issues, Chi Tianlei suddenly became spirited. Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, my Kirin Group was borrowed from Ryue. When the company is on track, I will return the money to her." Before Chi Tianlei could speak, Ing Xiaodai said, "Borrow money? Why would our son need to borrow money? How much did he borrow? Tell me, I will ask someone to return it to Longyou Courtyard." Chi Yu looked at his concerned mother with a smile and said, "No, no need. I want to be self-reliant. In fact, when I learned that you might be my biological parents that day, I hesitated in my heart. So, after thinking about it, it's normal for you to doubt my identity. After all, you are second to none in the country. How can I not arouse suspicion and speculation when I rashly recognize my relatives? Dad, Mom, let me try to manage the company on my own. I just want to do my own business. It doesn't matter to me if I have more money. I just want to enjoy the feeling of success. In fact, when you told me that you had transferred all your assets to my sister, I felt much more relaxed. At least now, no one will say that I'm going to steal your assets." Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai looked at each other with approval in their eyes. Chi Tianlei smiled and said, "Good. You're worthy of being my son. You're ambitious. I also know that with your special identity, I'm afraid you won't be able to inherit our family business. But it doesn't matter. Your sister's share will naturally be given to her. But you are also our child. We will treat you equally in this regard. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I won't give it to you. You don't lack money anyway. When you have a child, I can give it to my grandson. You don't have the right to refuse for my grandson." Looking at the proud smile in Chi Tianlei's eyes, Chi Yu really felt helpless. However, he also deeply felt his parents' determination to make it up to him. "Then you'll have to wait. At least in a short period of time, the possibility of me getting married is very small." Chi Tianlei smiled and said, It doesn't matter whether you get married or not. Shui is so beautiful. When you have a child in the future, he will be more handsome than you. If the girl looks like Shui, it will be perfect. Don't worry, even if you don't get married, when you have a child, I have a way to let him be fully recognized by the law." Why did they jump to the topic of children after just a few words? Chi was a little embarrassed, and Snow Girl was already blushing. Ing Xiaodai nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. Your father is right. You have to work hard. The sooner you have a child, the better we can have grandchildren. Our family has a small island in the international waters. The environment there is very beautiful. When we have grandchildren, your father and I will bring the children there to retire." "Oh, right. Our family is special. As long as you have the ability, have a few more children. The more the better." As she spoke, Ing Xiaodai was already smiling so widely that her eyes were squinted, obviously fantasizing about having a house full of children and grandchildren. Chi Yu looked at Snow Girl awkwardly, but Snow Girl didn't look at him. She giggled and said, "Auntie, I'm afraid this hope of yours is very easy to solve. Chi Yu has a lot of female confidants. If each of them can give birth to a child, they can probably form a basketball team." Ing Xiaodai and Chi Tianlei couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this. They looked at Chi Yu and didn't know what to say. Chi Tianlei coughed awkwardly. In this regard, men always acted like men. However, Ing Xiaodai was a little unhappy and scolded Chi Yu. "You child Shui is so good. You actually have other women behind her back. How can you face her? Listen to your mother, break up with those outside, and be good to Shui. Of course, if you have children with other girls, don't worry and bring them back. Your mother will take care of them for you." This, looking at Ing Xiaodai, Chi Yu really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, the strong familial love that he had never felt before warmed his heart. This was the feeling of home. Snow Girl walked to Ing Xiaodia's side and sat on the sofa's armrest. "Annie, don't make things difficult for him. In fact, I'm the last one to establish a relationship with Chi Yu. I'm the latecomer. If you do this, won't he dump me first?" Ing Xiaodai was stunned. Seeing that Snow Girl didn't look angry at all, she couldn't help but feel strange. Is that so? But don't you want to monopolize him and become Chiyu's wife? Snow Girl looked at Chiyu bitterly and said, Auntie, it's not that I don't want to, but that's simply impossible. Even I don't know how many women Chiyu has. He's not destined to belong to just one person. Ing Xiaodai looked at Chiyu blankly. This situation was obviously something she couldn't understand. Chiyu took this opportunity to quickly say, Mom, let's discuss this later. But I'm afraid I won't be able to get married in this life because I can't let any of them down. Chi Tianlei frowned. But you're letting each of them down. Which girl doesn't want to get married? How about this? Tell me first, how many women do you have? Chiyu looked at his father's unhappy expression and tentatively said, 4 no 5. Snow Girl, Wen Ting, Shangbing, Ruyue, and Ming Ming added up to exactly 5. Of course, he would include Wen Ting, because in his heart, Wen Ting was not dead at all. Chi Tianlei looked at his son in surprise. Can you do it? You found 5 wives at once. Although I know you're not an ordinary person, you still have to take care of your body. Ing Xiaodai snorted and said, What nonsense are you talking about? Don't lead your son astray. Chi Tianlei snappily said, Do you still need me to teach your son? I haven't even taught him, and he already has 5. Otherwise, you'd really want him to find a strong girlfriend. Ing Xiaodai stared at Chi Tianlei and said, What, my son? Isn't he also your son? All right. It's not easy to see our son. Don't scold him. I believe you is confident. Let's let nature take its course. Chi Tianlei nodded and said, That's the only way. But you inform me in advance when you're ready to get married. No matter how many women you have, I have a way to let you marry all of them. After all, we're not ordinary people. Chiyu looked at Chi Tianlei. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. His father was really resourceful. Was a problem that had been bothering him so easy to solve from his mouth? Chi Tianlei said, Now that we've recognized you, when you're free, come to the Golden Grain Group. I'll officially announce your identity at the board meeting. As my son, and an adult at that, I've already thought it through. The affairs of the Kirin Group are your own business. I promise I won't interfere. However, there's a precondition. You must come to the Golden Grain Group as a deputy general manager. Don't worry, it's not a position. You only need to come to work 1 day a week. Apart from the board of directors, the main management of the group is me and your mother. There are 8 or 9 positions above the deputy general manager, so you don't need to worry about anything. Chiyu thought about it and said, There's no need. This is just a formality. Chi Tianlei insisted, No, you're my son. If you don't work part-time in the company now, some things will be difficult in the future. If you don't agree, don't blame me for not helping you when you want to marry a wife. Anyway, even if you don't get married, I have ways to handle all kinds of normal procedures for your children in the future. Chapter 255. Listening to Chi Yu's words, Chi Tianlei sternly said, Child, I can imagine that you have a very important responsibility. But there is one thing you must promise us, and that is your safety. No matter what you do, you have to remember that your family is waiting for your return at home. Chiyu nodded and said, Dad, Mom, you can rest assured that I will pay attention to my safety. Wanting to hurt me is not an easy thing to do. Tonight, Snow Girl and I will leave the capital and will be back in about a month. After that, I will not be away for too long. I will be filial to you. Listening to Chiyu say that he would leave tonight, Chi Tianlei and his wife's faces showed a look of loss at the same time. Ing Xiaodai couldn't help but ask, Is it really that urgent? Chiyu nodded his head. Mom, we've just reunited, and I can't bear to leave you guys. However, my companions are all waiting for me to return. I have no choice but to rush back. However, I will try to come back as soon as possible. I hope to be with you for a few days. Oh, right. Have you found the person who ordered the bandits to attack the Golden Grain Building? Hearing Chiyu mention the incident last time, Chi Tianlei's eyes flashed with killing intent. There's no need to look. I have a rough idea who it is. This time, they actually went too far. Do they really think that I, Chi Tianlei, am made of paper? Speaking of the incident last time, fortunately you were there. Otherwise, if Ying was kidnapped by them, it would be troublesome. Yu thought that there was someone secretly trying to harm his parents. He couldn't help but worry a little. An invisible murderous aura filled the air, and the temperature of the entire hall seemed to drop a bit. "Dad, who is it? Let me help you solve the problem once and for all." Feeling the cold aura exuding from Chi Tianlei couldn't help but be startled and quickly said, "No, don't get involved. The relationship is very complicated, and it is related to the future of the entire Golden Grain Group. Let me handle it." Although this incident had caused great damage to the group itself and its reputation, it had also completely exposed those guys' wild ambitions. It would not be so easy for them to take action again. Now, these people are very restrained. They are afraid that I will find some evidence. Yu thought for a moment and said, "No matter what, you must pay attention to your own safety. If there's a problem and I'm not around, you can call this number for help." Yu took out a note that he had prepared earlier and handed it to Chi Tianlei. General Ji's phone number was written on it. General Ji had the Yin Huang Soul in his hands. Within the country, there was probably nothing that the Yellow Flame Soul could not solve. Chi Tianlei glanced at the phone number and Ji Zhongming's name. He was shocked. Ji Zhongming? Isn't this the famous Iron Blood General of our country? Are you related to him? Snow Girl smiled and said, "Of course it's related. One of Yu's confidants is General Ji Zhongming's only daughter." Chi Tianlei looked at his son strangely. He thought to himself, this kid is really something. However, when he needs to deal with emotional problems in the future, it will probably not be so easy. The family of three no longer talked about business and Yu's identity. Chi Tianlei and his wife were most interested in Yu's previous life. Unknowingly, they had already chatted from afternoon to night. During the process of chatting, Yu secretly transferred some of his source of nature energy into the couple's body, slightly improving their physical condition. As for the transformation, it would have to wait until he returned from the ancient beast era. Ying Xiaodai personally cooked for her son and cooked a sumptuous dinner with Snow Girl. The family was happy and harmonious. Feeling the unprecedented familial love, Yu was in a much better mood. Since returning from London, he was back to himself for the first time. He was no longer the leader of the Zodiac army, but the son of the couple in front of him. However, happy times are always short-lived. The sky was completely dark, and Chi Tianlei and his wife finally had to leave. Under their ardent urging and reluctance, Yu saw them out of the gate of the villa. After returning to the villa, Yu and Snow Girl walked back to their room. The first thing Yu did was to summon Little Peng. With Little Peng's strength, under the effect of energy, it condensed its body into the size of a laughing parrot. Its golden feathers looked very divine. "Dong Peng, you should have seen the couple just now. We're going back to the ancient beast era. Now, I will give you a task. In the shortest time possible, find a fierce beast with at least 6,000 years of cultivation in the vicinity of the capital, subdue it, and order it to protect the couple at all times. I'll give you an hour. I'll let you decide what to do next." Little Peng nodded to Yu and directly flew out of the window. If one were to say that he was extremely unwilling to become Yu's envoy at the start, then now he was completely convinced. After Yu obtained the Kongtong seal, he knew that even if he reached the strength of his father, the great Peng Wisdom King, as long as Yu did not agree, he could only become this strong man's envoy forever. As Yu's envoy, Little Peng found that his cultivation was improving rapidly under the influence of the origin of nature. He felt that it was definitely worth it to use 5 years of time to help this person in exchange for greater power. After letting Little Peng go, Yu used his mental strength and the aura of the origin of nature to maintain contact with him. With Yu's current strength, as long as Little Peng did not leave the capital, there would be no problem. Especially after obtaining the Kongtong seal, it had indescribable benefits for converging and condensing mental strength. During the time when Little Peng was away, Yu and Snow Girl came to the warehouse of the Dragonfield courtyard and stored all the ammunition that Yu had obtained through the contact information left by Hu Guang during the time that Snow Girl had gone to Tibet into the Kongtong seal. With these ammunition, the 4 tribes of the ancient beast period could hold on for a long time. Of course, Chi would not use the weapons of the Sacred Flame sect for nothing. After the first batch of Kirin Group's products was sold, he had already paid for the previous weapons and ammunition. After Chi Yu and Xiao Luo were done with their preparations, he gave General Ji a call and told him about his parents' situation. General Ji promised him that he would send 4 people from the soul of Yin Huang to protect Qi Tianlei and his wife. In this way, Qi Yu could leave with peace of mind. After reuniting with his parents, Qi Yu was in a good mood. However, when he finished arranging everything in the modern world and returned to the ancient beast period through the Kunlun mirrors, his good mood instantly disappeared. The energy of the Kunlun mirrors sent them directly to the camp of the 4 tribes of the ancient beast period. When the 2 of them appeared, the first thing they saw was a scene of devastation. The camp of the 4 families was now only 2/3 of its original size, and the 1/3 that had disappeared had become a piece of scorched earth. In the entire camp, cries and wails could be heard everywhere, as if lives were disappearing every minute. Seeing the miserable scene in front of him, Chi Yu could not help but feel like his heart was in his throat. When he had left, the situation was still very good, but now it had become like this. Obviously, a huge change had occurred. Without any delay, Chi Yu immediately returned to the camp where the Zodiac army was. The situation in the Zodiac army camp was similar to the outside. Injured members of the 12 Zodiac teams could be seen everywhere. Chi Yu found that at least 2/3 of the people were injured, and their injuries were very serious. However, to his relief, at least none of them were dead. Chi Yu, Ming Ming threw herself at him like a swallow. When Chi Yu returned, the aura that he emitted had been noticed by all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Ming Ming looked much more haggard than before he had left. Her pretty face was covered in dust, her hair was a little messy, and her aura was unstable. Her energy waves were also unstable. Obviously, she had been injured. Pulling Ming Ming into his arms, Chi Yu said in a low voice, "What happened? Weren't the Julie people completely suppressed by us? How could this be?" Ru Yue and the other Zodiac Guardian warriors also gathered around. Chi Yu had returned. They all felt a sense of relief. Ru Yue sighed and walked to Chi Yu's side, saying, "Let's go in and talk." Chi Yu and Snow Girl followed everyone back to the largest tent in the center. After Ru Yue's explanation, Chi Yu understood what had happened. As it turned out, when the Julie people's army had been reduced by half due to the combined efforts of the Human Alliance and the Zodiac army, a change suddenly occurred. Chi Yu returned to the Julie people's camp. When he realized that Chi Yu was not in the opposing camp, he immediately led the Julie people back to kill them. Chi Yu was indeed powerful. With the Pangu axe, even Yi Ruo, Qing Long, and the Black Tortoise could only barely hold him back. In terms of overall strength, the 3 of them were obviously stronger than Chi Yu. However, the Pangu axe was too frightening. Under Chi Yu's full power, he killed the Black Tortoise at the cost of some light injuries. Qing Long was also injured in order to protect Yi Ruo. If that was the case, the battle would at most be in a stalemate. After all, the Zodiac army could cause great damage to the enemy. However, after the first defeat, when Chi Yu led the army of the Julie tribe to attack for the second time, they were accompanied by hundreds of ferocious beasts. As this happened suddenly, the Human Alliance did not have time to react and suffered heavy losses. At this time, the most important thing was that the firearms and ammunition that Chi Yu and the others had brought from the modern era had been used up. This caused the Human Alliance's strength to decrease greatly. The Zodiac army alone could not withstand so many beasts. In desperation, in order to protect the 4 human races and the warriors of the Zodiac army, Ru Yu finally ordered everyone to use their tokens. The appearance of hundreds of golden-winged eagles immediately changed the situation of the battle. In the battle, they once again repelled the army led by Chi Yu. With the combined efforts of the Zodiac Guardian gods, Chi Yu could not defeat them even though he had the Pangu axe. He could only injure them lightly. However, the battle had just begun. How could the appearance of hundreds of golden-winged eagles not attract the enemy's attention? The Rock Wisdom King had long known that his son and a large number of his clansmen had disappeared. However, he could not find the culprit. Once he received a report from his subordinates about the situation, he immediately led his men to attack. He swore to avenge his son. He had brought more than half of the golden-winged eagle's strength with him. He had become a great help to Chiyu. Chiyu's strength was similar to that of the Rock Wisdom King. However, the Rock Wisdom King's clansmen were obviously much stronger than the Jili people. In order to prevent the Rock Wisdom King from coveting his Pangu axe, Chiyu had been keeping watch among the Jili people and did not attack again. Fortunately, this had prevented the human alliance from being completely annihilated. The 12 Zodiac guardian gods had led the Zodiac army to fight against the great Rock Wisdom King and his subordinates many times. However, their combined strength was not enough to fight against one of the great beast kings of the ancient beasts era. Under the valiant leadership of the Rock Wisdom King, they had defeated the Zodiac army several times. However, fortunately, they were wary of the orders of the Zodiac army's warriors. In addition, the 12 Zodiac guardian gods warriors had fought to the death, so the Zodiac army had not been completely destroyed. However, as many as 2/3 of the Zodiac guardian gods had been seriously injured, just like what Chiyu had seen. The Rock Wisdom King had only managed to escape with the protection of the golden-winged eagles. The Rock Wisdom King had already announced that if the Zodiac army did not release his clansmen and hand over his son, he would completely destroy the Zodiac army next time, regardless of the casualties of his clansmen. By the time Chiyu arrived, it was the second day after the Rock Wisdom King had made his threat. There were only 2 days left until the time limit he had given them. After listening to Ryue's explanation, Chiyu could not help but look gloomy. No wonder the human alliance had suffered such heavy losses. It was the Rock Wisdom King who had intervened. However, if the beasts were here, then where were the divine beasts? Why did they not send reinforcements? Chiyu was very clear about the Rock Wisdom King's abilities. With the Rock Wisdom King leading his clansmen, Chiyu was not confident that he could defeat the Rock Wisdom King. Therefore, what the humans needed the most now was a large amount of reinforcements. After understanding what had happened, Chiyu instructed everyone to recuperate first. He also took out the ammunition that he had brought back and asked the uninjured members of the Zodiac army to send them to the 4 human races. As for himself, he went to look for Iruo. When Chiyu saw Iruo, he could not help but be shocked. Before he left, Iruo was still so youthful and beautiful. She did not look like Kirin, who had lived for 1,000 years. However, when he saw Iruo again, Iruo's temples had turned white. It was as if she had suddenly aged more than 10 years. "Mother, I'm back." Chiyu took a few steps forward. Originally, he wanted to blame the divine beast for not sending reinforcements. However, when he saw Iruo, how could he bear to blame her? That's right, the black tortoise was dead. One of her 2 husbands was dead. How could she be in a good mood? When she saw Chiyu, Iruo's eyes revealed a tinge of joy. She held his hand and said, "You're finally back. The past few days have been like a nightmare for the humans." Chiyu said, "Mother, I already know what happened. You must be very sad about the death of the black tortoise. However, the dead are gone. We still have to fight against the Jili people and the beasts. You are the backbone of the humans. You must hold on." As he spoke, he channeled the energy of the source of nature into Iruo's body. With Chiyu's support, Iruo looked much better. There was a tinge of deep sorrow in her eyes. "The black tortoise is dead. If not for me, he would not have died. Chiyu's axe was originally aimed at me. However, in order to save me, the black tortoise used his strongest defensive power to block Chiyu's axe. I still remember it clearly. I am already old, and his body was split into 2 by the Pangu axe. Chiyu, promise me. Promise me that you will take revenge for the black tortoise. I'm already old. From now on, I can only rely on you." Looking at Iruo, Chiyu could not bear to reject her. "Mother, I will. As long as there is a chance, I will definitely kill Chiyu and take revenge for the black tortoise. Chiyu is the enemy of the entire human race. I will not let him off. However, I am curious. Since the great Rock Wisdom King brought his people to attack us, why did the divine beasts not appear? If not for Ryue and the rest fighting with all their might, the human race would have been wiped out. Where is Senior Imohua now? Iruo smiled bitterly and said, Child, don't blame Imohua. When the great Rock Wisdom King reached here, I had already requested for help. However, the reply I received made me give up on this idea. I don't know why. The great Rock Wisdom King, the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King, and the Chaos King actually came to an agreement. The great Rock Wisdom King is helping Chi Yu to attack us, while the main force of the Divine Beasts is being attacked by the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King and the Chaos King. They can't even protect themselves, let alone help us. Now, we can only rely on our own strength to fight against the great Rock Wisdom King and Chi Yu. However, we don't know how long we can hold on like this. Ever since Chi Yu was injured, he has been waiting for an opportunity. I believe that the next time the great Rock Wisdom King launches an attack on us, he will definitely show up. Even if he doesn't use the Pango Axe, he will still be a huge threat to us. On our side, your Zodiac army has already lost more than half of its combat power. The weapons that you brought back then are also almost used up. All we can do now is probably wait for death. When he came out of Irua's room, Chi Yu's heart was unusually heavy. He understood that Irua was right. Even with him, they couldn't fight against the allied army of the Golden-Winged Eagle and Chi Yu. What could he do to resolve the crisis in front of him? Zagru once said that if he didn't want his era to be affected, then history couldn't be changed. The final victor here had to be the humans. However, things had already reached this stage. How could he let the humans win? He and the Zodiac army could retreat, but that would mean that the humans here would be destroyed. For a moment, Chi Yu couldn't help but have a headache. He returned to his Zodiac army gloomily. Once he entered, Chi Yu heard Hu Guang's angry voice. F***CK, that bunch of stupid birds almost kill my dick. F***CK, if I don't take revenge, I am not a human. F***CK, if we were in our era, I would directly use a few Patriot missiles to blow up those stupid birds. Hearing Hu Guang's words, Chi Yu couldn't help but have a thought. In an instant, his gloominess disappeared. That's right. His greatest advantage wasn't the strength of the Zodiac army. It was the technology that he had that didn't belong to this world. Now that things had developed to this stage, in order not to change history, he had no choice but to take a gamble. At this thought, Chi Yu shouted, Hu Guang, come out for a moment. Hearing Chi Yu's voice, Hu Guang and Ian walked out of their own tents. Their pitiful wooden tents looked like they could collapse at any time. Boss, you're back. How is it? Will those divine beasts come? I think if they don't come, we should retreat. We have so many brothers here. We can't all be trapped here. We can still make it if we don't die. Chi Yu looked at Hu Guang and said with a smile, What? My underworld boss. If we retreat now, will you be able to swallow this anger? Hu Guang stamped his feet hard, but it caused the wound on his leg to hurt. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and said, What can I do even if I can't swallow it? I'm not as strong as them. F***CK, it hurts. Chi Yu said, Hu Guang, if we return to the modern world now, I give you only one day. Can you find weapons of mass destruction? Hu Guang was stunned at first, then his small eyes lit up. He raised his thick glasses and said in surprise, Boss, are you saying that we're going to use weapons of mass destruction here? Chi Yu's eyes flashed fiercely. So many of our brothers are injured, and the human race is about to be wiped out by them. We have no choice but to use them. Didn't the great Rock Wisdom King give us 3 days to think about it? Well, let's give him a little surprise. Tell me quickly, can you find weapons of mass destruction in 1 day? At least one that can deal with those golden-winged eagles in the sky. Without waiting for Hu Guang to speak, Ian, who was at the side, said anxiously, No problem. I'm going all out. For this, I want to see those stupid birds being blown up into the sky. Boss, do you have more? Weapons of mass destruction are strictly controlled by every country. However, we have a collection, and now is a good time to use it. It's made in Russia and belongs to the previous generations. Although its power can't be compared to today's high-tech products, it's definitely enough to deal with those stupid birds. Hearing Ian's words, Hu Guang couldn't help but be surprised. You mean that? Ian said coldly, "Yes, that's it. I don't believe it. F***CK. No matter how strong these stupid birds are, can they compare to a nuclear bomb?" Hearing Ian's words, Chiyu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Originally, he thought that Ian and Huguang would at most take out some small bombs. He didn't expect this guy to open his mouth and ask for a nuclear bomb, although Chiyu hadn't seen the power of a nuclear bomb. But he had heard that even he wouldn't be able to escape and scathe in the face of a nuclear bomb. How many of them could survive on the side of the Julie people and the great rock wisdom king? These two fellows were truly worthy of being the godfathers of the military world. They actually had such a thing in their collection. Too strong. Frowning, Chiyu rejected Ian's suggestion in the end. "No, we can't use a nuclear bomb." Ian was startled and said, "Why?" "The power of a nuclear bomb is definitely strong enough. If we use one, all the problems will be solved." That beautiful mushroom cloud, just thinking about it makes me excited. I thought I wouldn't have the chance to use it, but now it seems like it's just right. Chiyu shook his head and said, "No, we definitely can't use a nuclear bomb. Let's not talk about its destructive power. Even continuous radiation was not something that humans could withstand. This is a human settlement. If a nuclear bomb explodes, who knows how much area will be affected by the radiation? Don't forget, the humans of this era can be said to be our ancestors. If our ancestors are affected by the radiation and become strange, then our era will definitely be affected as well. Don't tell me you want to become a monster?" Hearing Chiyu's words, Ian couldn't help but stick out his tongue and scratch his head. "That's a big problem. Then what do you think we should do?" Chiyu said, "Don't you have any other weapons? Just a slightly stronger anti-air weapon will do. The Julie people aren't that scary. The ammunition I brought this time and the Zodiac army should be enough to deal with them. In 2 days, I am completely confident that everyone's body will recover. With the help of the 8-cloud-level water thundercloud force and the source of nature, Chiyu was indeed confident that he could do it." Huguang suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Forget it. I admit it. Although I'm a little reluctant to use it, I have no choice but to use it now." Ian said anxiously, "Old Hu, that's something worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. We're going to sell it to the Middle East." Chiyu was stunned and said, "What is it? If the effect is good, I will pay for it later. Kirin Group is developing very well. I estimate that in a year or two at most, I will have enough money to give you guys. 100 million US dollars is not a problem." It wasn't that Chiyu was being arrogant now, but with a rich father like Chi Tianlei, he naturally had more confidence than before. Facing the enemy now was no longer his problem. It was related to the entire human race. 100 million US dollars was still worth it. Huguang and Ian looked at each other. Then Ian said, "Boss, you're treating me like an outsider. Anyway, we secretly got this thing. You can just give us the cost price of 50 million. Chiyu said, "We don't have much time. Hurry up and tell us, what is it?" Huguang's expression became serious. It was rare for him to say, "Boss, have you seen the movie Brave Adventure Island?" Chiyu nodded subconsciously and said, "Of course I have. That is an eternal classic." "Ah, you're not going to say that the thing you're going to take out is the one in Brave Adventure Island?" Huguang nodded and said, "That's right. It is the VX gas missile." When he said this name, his expression was obviously a little ferocious. Chiyu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It was as if the scene in the movie Brave Adventure Island appeared before his eyes again. The green crystals in the missile looked so beautiful, but they were absolutely fatal. The male lead in the movie once said that as long as there was more than a spoonful of liquid poison gas in the air, then all the living things in a street would be destroyed. Who would have thought that Huguang and the others even had such a thing? It was really too strong. "Huguang, you have such a thing. Aren't you afraid of the government interfering?" Chiyu asked. Huguang snorted and said, "Although chemical weapons are widely condemned by the law, which country has ever stopped researching and developing them? Boss, don't worry. In terms of confidentiality, our Sacred Flame sect has always been the best. Only Ian and I know about the existence of the poison gas missile. One day is enough for us to deploy it. The poison in chemical weapons can be divided into 6 main categories: among which the most overbearing is the nerve poison gas, which is a derivative of organophosphoric acid and can be divided into G and V nerve poisons. G nerve poison is the nail alkyl fluorophosphonate or dialkyl aminocyanophosphonate type of poison. The main representatives were tabun, serene, and remin. Class V neurotoxins referred to dialkylaminoethyl methylthiophosphonate alkyl ester toxins. The main representative was called VX, which was the VX gas mentioned in the movie. The explanation in the movie is not exaggerated at all. Depending on the equipment, the liquid poison gas content in the missile is also different. We have a total of 4 VX gas missiles, and each of them contains 15 kilograms of liquid poison gas. Once it is ignited in the air, then the area it covers will definitely be terrifying. Moreover, this nerve poison gas has an advantage. It will completely ignite within an hour and will not cause continuous space damage. So, it seems to be the best time to use it now. I don't believe that those stupid birds can survive in front of the nerve poison. As expected of an arms dealer, with such a detailed introduction, Chiyu could not understand the components of the poison gas, but the power of this nerve poison gas missile was obvious. Although the golden-winged eagle was strong, in the face of such a strong poison gas, even he might not be able to handle it. At this moment, Little Peng's voice suddenly sounded in Chiyu's mind. "Master, don't let go of my people." Chiyu was stunned. After all, Little Peng was already his master, and its sorrowful voice caused Chiyu's emotions to fluctuate. With a flash of light, Chiyu released Little Peng from his body and said in a low voice, "Little Peng, you have to understand, it's not that I don't want to let go of your people. It's your people who don't want to let us go."